Thursday, March 15th, 2018, afternoon session of the Portland City Council. Carla, please call the roll.
Fritz.
Here.
Fish.
Here.
Saltzman.
Here.
Udaly.
Here.
Wheeler.
Here.
Welcome to the Portland City Council. The City Council represents all Portlanders and meets to do the city's business. The presiding officer preserves order and decorum during City Council meetings so that everyone can feel welcome, comfortable, respected, and safe. To participate in City Council meetings, you may sign up in advance with the Council Clerk's office for communications to briefly speak about any subject. You may also sign up for public testimony on resolutions or the first readings of ordinances. Your testimony should address the matter being considered at the time. When testifying, please state your name for the record. Your address is not necessary. Please disclose if you are a lobbyist. If you are representing an organization, please identify it. The presiding officer determines the length of testimony. Individuals generally have 3 minutes to testify unless otherwise stated. When you have 30 seconds left, a yellow light goes on. When your time is done, a red light goes on. If you are in the audience and would like to show your support for something that is said, please feel free to do a thumbs up. And if you want to express that you do not support something, please feel free to do a thumbs down. Disruptive conduct such as shouting or interrupting testimony or council deliberations will not be allowed. If there are disruptions, a warning will be given that further disruption may result in the person being ejected for the remainder of the meeting. After being ejected, a person who fails to leave the meeting is subject to arrest for trespass. Thank you for helping your fellow Portlanders to feel welcome, comfortable, respected, and safe.
Thank you very much. And just one quick bit of housekeeping before we get to this afternoon's item. If there is anybody here waiting or is here early for the time certain at 4 p.m. related to the Central City 2035 plan, that is actually going to be moved to March 22nd, and we'll do that at the time certain. But if you're here for that, it's not going to happen today. So with that, could you please, Carla, read our item?
Item 258, accept the 2018 Washington Park Master Plan update as a guide for future use and development of the park.
Commissioner Fritz.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you everybody for being here. The City of Portland purchased the original 40.78 acres of forested acres from Amos King for $32,624. Some people were against this purchase, given that it was already surrounded by woodlands. Now, of course, the Washington Park is a gem in the park system, serving not only Portlanders, but regional, national, and international visitors. In 1903, Washington Park was included in the John Charles Olmsted Park Master Plan for Portland. He noted in his report, it was called City Park at that time, already the capacity of City Park is taxed almost to its utmost on holidays and pleasant Sundays in summer. Portland Parks and Recreation completed the original master plan for the park in 1981. Many of the issues identified in the 1981 master plan still exist today, 35 years later, muchly due to the location and the wonderful facilities we have. The main themes include multimodal transportation to and through the park entrances, pedestrian paths linking the two ends of the park, illuminating views, and parking issues. Now, we have a 480-acre park, which includes the most valued attractions in our city. The International Rose Test Garden, that just celebrated 100 years anniversary, Portland Japanese Garden, the Oregon Zoo, the Portland Children's Museum, the World Forestry Center, and the Hoyt Arboretum, as well as the rest of the park. Over 3 million Portlanders, regional, national, and international visitors come to the park every year. This updated Washington Park Master Plan is both inspirational and forward-thinking. It comes in 3 phases to transform the visitor experiences. The plan focuses on 3 key themes: creating an identity. You know when you arrive in Washington Park, re-establishing the iconic views, access to nature, memorials, cultural activities, and places to play. Improve access, both to and within the park. The plan reduces the dominance of cars, maintains the current 1,400 paid parking spots, encourages people to take public transportation to the park, and once into the park to go by shuttle, foot, or bike. And thirdly, enhance the visitor's experience. There's a wide range of amenities that meet the needs of diverse groups and support the cultural organizations in the park. So with that introduction, I will turn it over to Parks Director Mike Abate.
Thank you, Commissioner, Mayor, members of Council. Mike Abate, Director of Portland Parks and Recreation. I'm thrilled to be here today to share with you a long-range vision for one of the city's most iconic and important parks. I'm joined today by Senior City Planner Emily Roth, who is the project manager for the project. And I want to continue what the Commissioner started, which is kind of the setting. Washington Park sits high astride the east-facing slopes of the West Hills. It's been a civic landmark for Portland for nearly 150 years. It's a place to escape the hustle and bustle of the city life, finding solitude as you meander the trails among the tall firs and rhododendrons. It's also a place to enjoy the multicolored jewels of the International Rose Test Garden, the world-class Portland Japanese Garden, and see animals from every continent at the Oregon Zoo. And let's not forget the views. The park has provided a true urban overlook since 1871. If any one park captures both the history and the future of the City of Roses, it's indeed Washington Park. In 2012, with Commissioner Fish's leadership, Council made a bold decision to address the parking and transportation problems in Washington Park head-on. They approved paid parking for Washington Park and also committed to investing 100% of the revenue into solving the congestion issues plaguing the park, its partners, its neighbors, and its visitors. In 2014, the parking meters went live, and with the help of the newly formed Transportation Management Association in the park, now called Explore Washington Park, we've been reaping the benefits. In 4 short years, private automobile trips to Washington Park have dropped 22%. Transit ridership has grown 66%. And park attendance has continued to rise. Just last year, in our summer season, we saw an 8% growth in attendance in the park. Linking the two ends of the park, the south entrance by the zoo and the north at the gardens, is a significant move in this plan. Today, we've started this work with a free shuttle, paid for by that parking revenue, which links more than 130,000 visitors each summer from the Mack stop to all the attractions in the park. So today we're here to present the master plan update for your acceptance. This is the community's vision for the park in the future. The plan sets forth the concepts for updating and transforming the entire park into one that is truly world-class, one that provides a stunning setting for the individual jewels currently within the park. It paints the overall desired future and then describes how to achieve this over multiple phases and years. One of the goals of the Washington Park Master Plan update is, quote, to fulfill the potential for Washington Park to become a world-class park valued for inspirational beauty, areas of respite, recreation, health, and vitality. It's clear that a world-class park is easy to get to, it's easy to get around, it minimizes conflicts between private vehicles and pedestrians. It's a place to decompress from everyday stresses by taking a walk in nature, an opportunity to explore and discover with each new experience in the park. And a world-class park has something for everyone, from toddlers to teenagers, from 20-somethings to 90-somethings. It must engage, inspire, and refresh every generation and cultural background of visitor. The park enhancements and proposed changes reflect the feedback that Portland Parks and Recreation received from the public through online surveys and open house. Russian, Vietnamese, and Spanish-speaking focus groups, the cultural institutions in the park, the Champions Committee, Portland Park staff, neighbors, Explore Washington Park, board and staff. Overall, there's strong support for the proposed enhancements and changes to Washington Park, but as in all plans, choices had to be made, so no individuals or institutions got everything they wanted. Another goal is to make Washington Park easy to get to and move through once there. This update sets the park up for the future the next 20 to 30 years. As the Commissioner mentioned, there's currently 1,400 auto parking spaces in the park. This plan maintains that number of total parking spaces at 1,400. acknowledging that visitors will still drive to the park and that even if more parking was provided, there would never be enough. Thus, we looked at alternative transportation that people will use to get to the park in the future. Transit, rideshare, future autonomous vehicles, and once in the park, moving around by foot, by bicycle, TriMet bus, or shuttle. We moved private vehicles to the edges of the park, and by doing so, created more space for park plazas, spaces, gardens, while eliminating conflicts between pedestrians, bicycles, and cars. Before we go forward, I want to really acknowledge the great work on this master plan by a local award-winning Portland landscape architecture firm, Place Studio, and particularly Charlie Brucker, Jocelyn Bates, and Sarah Canepa, who are here with us today. So now Emily, our project manager, will give kind of the highlights of the plan.
Thank you. Can I get the PowerPoint?
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mayor Wheeler and City Commissioners.
Good afternoon.
There are a few new faces on the City Council since we were here just about 2 years ago to get approval for the consultant contract to develop this plan. I should be saying the proverbial, I have a few more gray hairs since this planning process began. But lucky for me, the women in my family, they don't turn gray until their late 60s or early 70s. I'm here today as a project manager for the Washington Park Master Plan update. I am representing the team and my colleagues that worked with me on this master plan. Oops, we lost a slide. There we go. As you heard from Commissioner Fritz and Director Abate, Washington Park is our most visited park in the city, with over 3 million park users per year. It is enjoyed by neighbors for recreation and respite and regional and international visitors. In this iconic park, we have world-class gardens, the zoo, which is owned and operated by Metro, Hoyt Arboretum with 6,000 species of plants, the Portland Children's Museum, World Forestry Center, all in the southern end of the park, as you can see up here. In the northern end, we also have trails, playgrounds, and natural areas that connect the park to the West Side Wildlife Corridor that runs from Forest Park to Tryon Creek. Oh, yes, sorry. Excuse me. We have world-class gardens, the International Rose Test Garden, Portland Japanese Garden, also at the north end of the park. Washington Park is served by the MAX, TriMet Bus Line 63, over 1,400 paid parking spaces, and during the spring and summer, a very popular free shuttle to move visitors around the park. There are also congestions and parking problems in the park.
What do you think?
We started the process with a technical investigation to understand the state of the park, the cultural history, landslide areas, structural stability, access problems, and ecological health were some of the items included. Then we started the planning process. We tabled in the park. We tabled at local farmers market, conducted 3 online surveys, had a party in the park, held 3 focus groups in Spanish, Vietnamese, and Russians, and even tailgated one afternoon in the park, speaking to everybody who came by, handing out popsicles and cold glasses of water that day. We listened to Portlanders, visitors, and neighbors throughout the process. We went to Neighborhood Association, Explore Washington Park Board, and Cultural Institution Board meetings. The plan that you're about ready to see reflects the enhancements and new amenities that we heard are needed, or if added, would enhance the park for our visitors and Portlanders. Of course, we could not add or improve everything that people asked for. For example, we had a suggestion for an aerial tram from Goose Hollow to the International Rose Test Garden as a way to move people. It's not included in this plan, but maybe 40 years from now. We formed a champion committee to guide us through the planning process. They created the goals of the plan and made sure we were inclusive in all our outreach. that we talked to and heard from people throughout Portland, including underserved and immigrant communities that often don't come to the park. They also reviewed the plan at every stage, giving us feedback and guidance. In all, we received over 2,500 comments and responses throughout the process. This helps shape what is in the plan update. The highlights of what we heard are: we should maintain what we have first. Reduce the dominance of cars in the park. Create a regional trail through the park. Restore and preserve natural areas. Add a winter garden and build a canopy walk. The master plan itself is organized around odd numbers. 7 goals created by the Champion Committee. 2, which you have heard, a world-class park and better access. The others includes showcase for horticultural excellence and preserve natural area integrity, connect people of all communities to the identified venues and activities. The park is well-funded and supported. It adds economic vitality to the city and the region. It cultivates a rich educational, cultural, and historic vitality, and embraces the cultural diversity of its visitors and its regional community. It is resilient to extreme weather. There are 5 focus areas as shown on the slide: the Arboretum area, the South Entry, the Parkway, which connects the South Entry with the garden area, and City Park, which was the original park and historic place of what the first acres of the park. And we heard from the public that they wanted more information. So we have 3 hubs proposed where you can get full information of the park at the South Entry, at the Arboretum, at the garden. And as you heard from Commissioner Fritz, we have 3 themes: create identity, improve access, and enhance visitor experience. And finally, in another group of 3, we have 3 phases of implementation. Set the stage, solidify the vision, and enhance the park. Our first theme is create identity. Washington Park offers a broad range of experience that respects cultural and historic connections, maintains access to nature, play, and views, and supports world-class cultural institution. The plan enhances the park's character and boundaries through creating gateways, restoring views, and natural area enhancements. One of our first example is to recreate the original entrance to the park, which was actually off West Burnside at 24th. In the bottom picture, this is what that looks like now. Very overgrown. Most people don't even know it exists. It's difficult to find. It's overgrown. However, it is still used by pedestrians and cyclists connecting to Northwest Portland. And the stairs will give you a great workout. As shown in this vignette, the entrance will be a neighborhood park, connecting the city core with the park, an improved entrance for pedestrians, bicycles, and perhaps an autonomous people mover. It is connected to TriMet bus service. This enhanced gateway will welcome people to Washington Park from Northwest Portland and the city core, all on public transportation, biking, and by foot. This is a phase 1 project. Here is our next bold, big move: create identity. We propose significant changes in the garden area, the home to the International Rose Test Garden and the Portland Japanese Garden. Now, this area is often defined by seasonal traffic congestion instead of beautiful gardens and views. By closing Rose Garden Way to automobiles and bicycles and moving the tennis courts, there's an opportunity to create a cohesive garden experience from the International Rose Test Garden to the Japanese Garden. We will have additional gardens, including a winter garden in a bird-friendly indoor facility that could have a small cafe. and the information hub. There will be a plaza and promenade at the entrance to the Rose Garden, where visitors would enjoy a variety of local food, views of the gardens, and downtown. This area would become dominated by visitors and Portlanders, and not by private vehicles and congestions. It will be a showcase of horticultural excellence for everybody in our city and everybody who comes and visits. This is a phase 2 project. Our second theme, as you've heard, is improved access. Access is a major driver for the master plan update. This theme is defined by Washington Park as a connected park with improved circulation to and within the park. You can get out of your car and explore. The master plan update reduces the dominance of cars in the park, creates better transit and active transportation options, connects the park to the region, and emphasizes multiple ways to move through the park. The access and parking shown in this plan are concepts, though we did look at 16 different scenarios before you see this one in the plan. We did our homework. The transportation management plan, the implementation step of this master plan, will look in detail at the feasibility of implementing the access and parking changes. Explore Washington Park will lead that planning effort. Let's start with trails. The big idea is to create a 12-foot wide paved accessible trail that connects the south entry to the garden area, as shown in this picture. This proposed trail will follow the alignments of the railroad tracks outside of the zoo. The train now runs inside the zoo and will continue to do so. The train has not run outside of the zoo since 2014 due to structural failures and a landslide at the lower end of the route. This proposed trail will be a path through the forest for families, kids, and individuals to enjoy the park. It proposes seating and natural play spots along the trail. There is, of course, one caveat. At this time, PP&R, Metro, and the zoo are exploring the feasibility of accommodating both the rail and the regional trail within the current line right-of-way. Other trail improvements in this plan include connection to the regional trail outside the plan so that you can connect from Washington County through the park into Portland. Building additional accessible trails for more people to easily move around the park. And a connection to the pedestrian bridge over Burnside that will be built next year. What would the Washington Park Master Plan update be if we didn't talk about parking? Just to reiterate, there are just over 1,400 paid parking places in the park now, and there will be just over 1,400 paid parking places when all 3 phases of the master plan are complete, just rearranged in a few locations. The parking configurations shown in the plan are conceptual and will be refined through the transportation management plan. In the southern end of the park around the zoo, Portland Children's Museum, the World Forestry Center, and the Vietnam Memorial, there are presently 949 paid spaces. This is also the area where the Max stop is. The plan reconfigures the large parking lot, B, that's shown here, to allow room for a proposed plaza around the Max stop. The lot north of the Max stop, labeled C, will include a drop-off area, so we won't have so much congestion in front of the zoo. And in phase 3, more parking will be built at the present location of the Portland Children's Museum. To be clear, the Children's Museum will stay in the park until their lease expires in 13 years or they find a new home. There's a net gain of 31 spaces in the south entrance parking area, And as you can see from the diagram, it will be changed in all 3 phases. Phase 2 is the garden area parking. This area is where the largest parking changes are proposed. To alleviate the congestion and conflicts between private vehicles, drop-offs, buses, bicycles, and pedestrian, the plan proposes to remove the parking on Southwest Kingston Avenue and closing Rose Garden Way to private vehicles and parking for the plaza that we described earlier. The tennis courts will move down to the present field location, and on the 2 northern tennis courts, an accessible parking lot and drop-off area will be constructed. The other tennis courts will be de-paved to create garden area, including an indoor garden. The plan maintains parking on one side of Southwest Sherwood from the Rose Garden to the new parking lot. A shuttle stop is proposed at the new parking tennis area, and there will be a walking trail to the garden area. This is also a great location for an autonomous people mover. There are now 399 parking spaces in this area. 368 are shown in the plan. Again, the Transportation Management Plan will be examining the feasibility of the access and parking in this area as proposed. Improved access also means make it easy for people to move around the park. Presently, from the Explore Washington Park 2007 Visitor Survey Report, 22% of visitors now take transit to the park, and 8% use rideshare. If we look at the garden area, the mode split is 49% automobile, 25% transit, and 14% car share. Also, we have 11.5% that walk or bicycle to the garden area. The most popular boarding stop for the shuttle is in the garden area. 43% of the boarding happens there, with 57% visitors from outside of Oregon and Washington, so anywhere in the United States and international. Our visitors have figured out how to take the MAX, take car share, get to the park, and use the free shuttle to go around, as have many, many Portlanders. Trends show automobile usage decreasing by 5% per year, 5% year after year, to, as Director Abate said, a new low of 63%, with a strong growth in transit use. The plan continues to promote the use of people movers, public buses, free shuttles, one day a driverless minibus. Either getting to the park or once in the park, these vehicles efficiently move people around the park. The Washington Park free shuttle runs every 7 minutes when there is no congestion. Moving cars to the edge will increase the efficiency of the shuttle and our visitor experience. Just take a moment here. Imagine taking Max to the park, getting on the shuttle, stopping at Hoyt Arboretum, then the garden area, catching a people mover to the West Burnside Gateway, and then walking or grabbing Bike Town to ride to Northwest Portland and downtown. All while your car, if you happen to own one, is parked in the driveway. Our third theme is enhance the visitor experience. This theme enhances Washington Park for everyone, every day. The programming is affordable, diverse range of activities, economic viability of the parking and cultural institutions. The park is resilient and safe for staff and visitors. To enhance the visitor experience, one concept is the South Garden Entry Plaza that will be directly connected to the TriMet Lesacoin Plaza. Here, you would arrive, step out of the MAX elevator, or be dropped off in a designated area, take the bus or drive your car, and enter into a new linear garden plaza that would link the Oregon Zoo entry to the World Forestry Center and a new visitor hub. You will arrive at a park, not at a parking lot. There will be a shuttle, a bus stop, and a location for rideshare. Visitors would have access to the zoo without crossing a street. The garden plaza will be a place to enjoy a picnic and take in the scene. What is a park without play? Play and programming makes the park come alive with music and with laughter. The importance of play, discovery, and being outdoors are highlighted in many park studies. The plan proposes improvements to the amphitheater, including a new band shell or roof structure. We heard from many in the community that they would like to see additional free concerts and cultural events at the park. This would bring them from the east side to Washington Park. 4 new tennis courts will be built to replace the ones in the garden area. The area will also include a restroom and picnic area. Updates to the children's playground are proposed to make it more accessible and fun. Outdoor adventure built by the Portland Children's Museum will continue to be used as a public nature play and picnic area. As many people know, I am also the natural resources planner for our park system. I am passionate about protecting and enhancing urban natural areas for wildlife habitat and passive recreation. Natural areas enrich our city, especially as we continue to urbanize. The natural areas in this park are valued for habitat, wildlife, and passive recreation. They are an integral connection to the West Side Wildlife Corridors. They are a place for individual reflection or a place to enjoy time with friends and family, enjoying the flowers and leaf colors at Hoyt Arboretum, or the chance to see a pileated woodpecker in our city. The importance of natural areas in the park are recognized in the plan update. Actions include enhancements to the ecological health of the forest by removing invasive species, planting more understories. Trails maintained and rebuilt to our newest guidelines and standards, and to make Washington Park a dark sky park. Building a forest canopy was the most popular attraction that the public wanted added to the park. The plan calls for working with Hoyt Arboretum friends to find an appropriate location that will balance protecting the trees and offering the opportunity for visitors to enjoy a treetop view of the forest. And there's an opportunity to add off-road cycling, making Washington Park part of the Ride to Ride opportunity being developed by the off-road cycling plan at the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability. And of course, all of this comes with a price tag. As you can see, creating identity, improving access, and enhancing the visitor's experience means changes and improvements to the park. The master plan has 3 phases of implementation and cost. Phase 1, set the stage, about $24.5 million. Phase 2, solidify the vision, approximately $37.5 million. Phase 3, enhance the park, approximately $32 million, for a total cost of $94 million that includes both hard and soft costs and escalation. It will require a funding strategy and public-private partnerships to raise the funds to implement the vision shown in the plan for our most visited park within the city. I want to leave you with a vision of what this iconic park can become. It is a rainy winter day in Portland. You feel like being outside and grabbing a snack with friends. You walk into the park from West Burnside, through the enhanced cloud forest in Stearns Canyon, Walk through the Rose Garden Plaza. Enjoy the Portland Japanese Garden views and the views of downtown. Come back to the newly opened Winter Garden and Glass House. Have a cup of tea and a bite to eat, listening to many different languages. Grab a ride share home. Sounds pretty nice, doesn't it? As I stated in the beginning, I am representing the staff and consultant team that created this plan. It takes a village. I would like everyone in the audience here who gave input in the plan to stand up. Everybody who gave input into the plan, please stand up.
All right.
I want to be the first one to say thank you very much. We could not have built this plan without you.
And as Emily mentioned, there we go. On this slide, you'll see many, many individuals from park staff, consultant team, and the champions who supported this plan. Doesn't show up. Okay. Well, there's a long list of people. And our consultant team, I mentioned Play Studios, but I also want to mention Jean Lawson and her staff from JLA Public Involvement. They created and administered a unique and incredibly effective public outreach strategy. My colleagues in planning, public involvement, land stewardship, all the Portland Parks folks who participated, and champions. We have a list, I'm going to read them since it's not visible to you, of folks who've been involved for the past 2 years advising us.
We can see them.
Oh, you can't see it? Oh, it's just not up
They
here
can
then.
see it. They
Okay,
can see
Joe
it, but
Angel
it's-
and Kimberly Bound.
Yeah, it's too dark out here, Mike,
Ernest Hayes.
but they
Okay.
can see it on their monitors.
Okay.
And
Got it.
I would imagine that people at home can see it as well.
Yeah, okay. So at this point, Council, we have several community members who would like to testify, and the first three represent that Champions Committee I just mentioned. So Kimberly Bound, Gretchen Hollins, and John Russell.
Good presentation, thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, indeed.
Okay, guys, I'll start.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Hello, council members, Commissioner Fritz, Director of Body. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. I'm Kimberly Bowen, and in addition to serving on the Champions Committee, I'm one of Portland's Royal Rosarians, serving as the Mayor's Ambassador of Goodwill for the City of Roses. I'm also a caretaker for the International Rose Test Garden. As president of the Friends of the Rose Garden and an Oregon State Master Gardener, I coordinate and join hundreds of volunteers leading tours, deadheading roses, and interacting with thousands of visitors who come to the Rose Garden from Portland and around the world. I'm here to champion this plan's update and implementation. The update's vision and goals provide the critical overall guidance for the plan, but the key themes of creating identity, improving access, and enhancing visitor experience especially resonate and offer tangible focus for recommendations. I must admit my focus and bias for the gardens area of Washington Park. However, the multi-hub approach of a spread of visitor services and information in 3 areas of Washington Park is critical to linking the park together. It's thrilling to have the update include a regional trail along the old zoo train right-of-way. This will be a standout recreational offering and truly connect Washington Park's south and north zones. The International Rose Test Garden is one of the city's iconic sites and a manifestation of our moniker, the City of Roses. The Rose Garden's sister, the Japanese Garden, is also internationally renowned. The update creates a gardens area to appropriately focus implementation strategies to complement both areas and their surroundings. The transportation and circulation needs of the gardens area are at a breaking point today, or this summer. I advocate that the update's implementation schedule move all transportation-related projects, such as the garden's lower parking lot and tennis and picnic area project, into Phase 1. The Rose Garden Way Plaza project is a good proposal, but must accommodate vehicle drop-off opportunities in immediate proximity to the Rose Garden for private, rideshare taxi vehicles and tour buses. Regarding visitor services, I applaud the recommendations for a garden's restrooms, in addition to one down at the amphitheater, an interim visitor center, and a depot cafe. They will provide critical visitor needs which are sorely lacking today. Wayfinding and signage does need the highest implementation priority. A comprehensive wayfinding plan should consider or inform the visitor interpretive services and signage with the park's venues and cultural institutions. We have a most urgent need to develop these services within the International Rose Test Garden, and that will be complemented. Hand in hand with the update's improved amenities, it is absolutely vital that adequate Portland Parks and Recreation staffing is in place. The update addresses staffing for Portland's Park and Recreation, although it's unclear whether the phases are additional or cumulative. The Rose Garden is in immediate need of a horticulturalist. Adequate Portland Park and Rec staff is necessary while assuming there are strong and contributing volunteers and friends of groups. Partners and volunteers augment Portland Park and Rec staff, and adequate staff is critical in providing their direction and management. Additionally, with the increase of visitor amenities, especially food options, the increase in the amount of trash volume must be matched with more park technicians. I was honored to serve on the Updates Champions Committee and have been very impressed with the quality of work by the Portland Park and Rec staff and project team place. The update lays out a vision for our beloved Washington Park through its growth and challenges for the next 30 years. It represents a consensus of stakeholder input, which was sometimes contradictory or competing. But regardless, all shared a common love and commitment to Washington Park. I endorse the update and plead for an expeditious implementation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you, John. I'm Gretchen Hollins. Thank you, Commissioner Fritz and Director Abate, for your leadership to create this plan and fund this work. My connection to the park is through Sylvan Highlands neighborhood. We've been neighbors there for 19 years, but my love of the park reaches back to 1989 when I visited Portland as a tourist. The access to trails, native plants, and birds so close to the city center was amazing. I'd never seen anything like it. We hiked, my husband and I hiked for miles. We saw Douglas squirrels, the pileated woodpeckers, deer, coyotes, bunnies. Once we saw an elk, very lost, but unforgettable. And I just can't imagine a city where you could see that. It's all sit within easy reach of the city. So we quit our jobs in Colorado, like many people, and moved here. So my perspective on this work is very personal. And it was definitely work. We must commend project manager Emily Roth, who has balanced conflicting interests, and she provided us in the committee with mountains of technical information to consider. It was an excellent effort, and the plan is the result of great work by many, many people through a complex process. The champions are a diverse group of professionals and volunteers who represent the business community, neighbors, Explore Washington Park, Metro, the other venues in the park. And early in the process, we did agree to a shared vision and goals. But creating that shared vision was not easy. There is a richness in the cultural institutions like the Japanese Garden and the zoo, for example, that have their own excellent visions and goals. There were different perspectives and some tension, and we were fortunate to have I would say robust conversations. So, but this is one of the reasons I joined these efforts, to be challenged and to hear different voices. Ultimately found middle ground and common purpose in a great plan that I'm happy to champion. And I feel that the public input, which was solicited throughout the process, was heard and did shape the final plan. In closing, I want to highlight a few features. First, in phase one, the elements that protect experience with nature, the trail improvements to the updated forest fire plan. I think we all saw this past summer the importance of having an updated forest fire plan. Improved access to West Burnside and Stearns Canyon will make a real difference in connecting people to the park, and I'm excited about that phase too. Lastly, managing and reducing the dominance of cars will help people slow down and appreciate this amazing park. This goal supports the investment the city has already made with Vision Zero, so I'm very pleased about that. So thank you, and I encourage you to support the plan.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, I'm John Russell, and I'd also like to thank Commissioner Fritz and Mike Abate for their leadership in this very important plan. I feel I have some credibility to testify on this. I've served on the Champions Committee from the beginning. As Commissioner Fish knows, for years I chaired the Friends of Portland Parks. I've served on the board of the Japanese Garden Society, and like every parent and grandparent in Portland, family and I have enjoyed the zoo. I would like to second the notion that transportation issues be moved up into the first phase. And one of the big, Emily spoke about two things that were listed as sort of far in the future. One is an aerial tram. If you've been to the San Diego Zoo, one of the most famous zoos in the world, with a similar situation of vast size and an undulating layout, an aerial tram, simple aerial tram is a way to get from one end of the park to the other. And autonomous vehicles are probably in the near future. What we were told is that there is a $2 or $3 million annual revenue stream from the parking, and that revenue stream needs to be spent in the park. An ongoing, reliable revenue stream lends itself to bonding, and it may be possible to jumpstart the improvements in the park with the capital you'd get from a bonding program. But nonetheless, I hope I endorse this plan, and I hope you do too. So thank you.
Thank you,
John. Before Mike Abate brings up the next panel, I want to move some minor amendments. That you have the change memo in front of you, Council. We did make a few minor changes since it was filed with since the plan was filed with the ordinance. They include adding wording to emphasize the transportation management plan as the first step to implement the plan. This was added to the executive summary, the access section, and the implementation chapter. So I think everybody agrees that getting the transportation management plan going is crucial as the next step. Number two, changing the graphic on page 53 to minimize the size of the glass house in the vignette. When built, the glass will be designed to a different size, and so we just wanted to have truth in advertising. And then on page 58, change the shuttle a picture of the TriMet bus in the park, adding text that adds, the TriMet bus line 63 will continue to operate in the park. This bus route is an important connection from downtown to the park and through the transportation and through the surrounding neighborhoods. The bus route will be determined in the transportation management plan. I'm happy to note that we do have TriMet support for continuing to provide service to the park, which was a misunderstanding, I think, in the community that people felt that that wasn't going to happen, but it is. And then on page 59, we changed the subheading to TriMet bus, park shuttle, and people mover. So I move that as a package of amendments.
Second.
Thank you.
We have a motion from Commissioner Fritz, a second from Commissioner Daly. We'll go ahead and leave that open until after testimony, if that's all right.
That's great, thank you.
Perfect.
Council, I'd like now to invite Michael Wallace from Arlington Heights Neighborhood Association and Kristen Shorey from Sylvan Highlands Neighborhood Association.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Hello, I am Michael Wallace.
Just push the button, please,
Oh,
sorry.
push the-
And we can just leave the buttons on after
There we
people
go.
are done. Thank
Okay.
you.
Hello, I'm Michael Wallace, President of the Arlington Heights Neighborhood Association. Arlington Heights is surrounded by Washington Park on three sides and is therefore most directly affected by activities and development in the park. But more than geography, we are a group with strong ties to the park and consider ourselves stewards of this beautiful sanctuary. We know Washington Park. We love Washington Park, and we want a master plan for Washington Park. We have been following the plan's development and evolution, and we appreciate Emily Roth and Victor Sanders and all the efforts the city has made to involve our neighbors near and far. We need a master plan. We know Washington Park is changing. We need a master plan to guide the evolution of Washington Park, and we fully support the city's explicit planning efforts.
Actually, if you move the mic a little bit further away,
Oh,
paradoxically, it works better.
Is that better?
Yeah.
Okay.
About 6 inches is
6 inches, okay.
There you go.
The current draft of the master plan is divided into 3 phases. Phase 1 for the first 5 years, Phase 2 for the next 10, and Phase 3 after that. We do not support the proposals in Phases 2 and 3 that create additional structures, add more pavement, or allow for any but the most basic commercial ventures. This kind of capital D development is detrimental to the very essence of Washington Park. We applaud the focus of Phase 1. Maintaining what is in the park now is crucial for keeping Washington Park in a class of its own. Improvements to safety, wayfinding, and accessibility will further this goal. We are particularly supportive of shifting vehicles out of the center of the park and improving access for people walking through the park. We support the protection and enhancement of natural areas and quiet spaces to allow people to connect with nature. Washington Park is a place for people to walk, to view, to chat with friends, and to experience the nature that is so close to our downtown area. We must manage vehicle traffic and transportation, including congestion and parking. We have long recognized that managing traffic and transportation, particularly private vehicles, is the key to improving the overall park experience as we move ahead. A carefully crafted transportation management plan should have been a key part of the master plan update, and we are glad to see that this item is included in the master plan's next steps. The transportation management plan should be based on public input, and it should focus on mode shifting, getting people out of private cars and onto public transit. It should be publicly reviewed before it is approved by City Council. This must be done before any additional park construction or infrastructure is considered by City Council. We must reduce the dominance of cars. We appreciate the plan's proposed efforts to improve vehicle circulation and reduce the dominance of cars in the park. Reducing or eliminating car traffic in the park should be a priority, along with improving pedestrian pathways and trails linking park areas. We can convert Kingston Drive to a multimodal path. Removing private cars from Southwest Kingston Drive and converting it to a multimodal bicycle, pedestrian, shuttle path should be in Phase 1 of the plan. This would eliminate a $10 million line item from the Phase 1 budget. The historic Zoo Train ride connecting the north and south ends of the park should be restored. The Zoo Train moves 350,000 people within the zoo annually. When the train route linked the north and south ends of the park, it was popular. It was always full, and it was a significant factor in reducing congestion and traffic at the north end of the park. The park is for people, not for vehicles. We have yet to realize the long-term visitor impact from the reservoir improvement project and the congestion that this will create. To quote the master plan, the park should be a place where arriving without a car is easy. The park is for people, not for vehicles. Moving cars to the edges of Washington Park, creating a pedestrian and bicycle path separate from cars, and increasing active transportation ranked as the highest priorities from those who participated in both the in-person and online surveys. We support sustainable design and environmental conservation. The overriding goal of any plan for Washington Park must be to sustain its viability as a natural area for present and future generations. The master plan must prioritize sustainability and conservation over new development. There must be an ecological assessment of the park's natural areas and a plan to restore and preserve them. Park attractions are nothing without their natural setting in the woods. Every feature added to the park must be sustainable and maintainable to enhance the park experience. Managing fire and other potential dangers must be an important part of the plan, well ahead of any development efforts. We must fund operations and maintenance. We want to stress maintaining the existing integrity of the park and focusing on its natural beauty. The problem of serious ongoing maintenance issues needs focus and resolution. Much of the operations and maintenance work to be done, such as keeping existing trails in good condition, managing ivy, managing fallen trees and erosion, restoring and maintaining stormwater systems, preventing fire and enhancing safety, and providing wayfinding signage is not glamorous, but it must be carried out. The main goal of the plan must be to demonstrate superior stewardship of existing park resources and infrastructure. We must maintain the character of the park. We concur that Washington Park stands out because of its physical beauty, diverse offerings of gardens, museums, zoo, arboretum, memorials, natural areas, trails, and topography. We want to keep this physical beauty intact. We do not need food in the park. Portland has plenty of dining options minutes away from the park boundaries. We do not need food carts or other dining options inside the park. Can you imagine trying to stop and smell the roses with the odor of frying oil wafting through the air? One of the city's goals is to provide opportunities for Portland residents to improve their physical and mental health and well-being, and providing attractive parks is an important way to achieve this goal. Let me close with a quote from the Oregon Historical Society that captures the original vision for Washington Park. The park provides, quote, a sense of closeness to nature removed from the clang and cluster of the city below. The spirit of the park is serene. As we plan for the future, let us not bring the city's clang and cluster into the park. Thank you.
Thank you. Could I ask a couple of follow-up questions just for clarification purposes? You mentioned that if you took the Kingston Drive and closed that, it would eliminate a $10 million line item from phase one. Can you be more specific about which line item you're referring to? Because I don't see that on the phasing strategy.
May I call on a fellow neighbor?
Sure.
I think it's number 11 in phase one, because it's instead of a multimodal pathway.
Could you come up to the microphone so that people at home can hear you? Thank you.
So it's
Just wait, because otherwise we don't get the captioning, please.
If you could state your name for the record, please.
Hillary McKenzie.
Thank you, Hillary.
This suggestion replaces the multimodal pathway, which is removing the train tracks and putting the multimodal path in the current zoo train right away, and there's discussion about sharing that. Our proposal is currently Kingston Drive, which is the long drive that connects the zoo, and the Rose Gardens be converted to the multimodal path. Right now, it's a 2-lane road. It's very lightly used. The shuttle uses it uphill. You could easily generate a 12-foot wide multimodal path on Kingston Drive and maintain the current shuttle route, and it saves that line item of $10.2 million, line item 11, and that money could be spent restoring the train, for instance.
So this would eliminate the regional trail, which, if I'm looking at this correctly, goes all the way from the zoo to the Japanese garden. Is that correct?
And right, it wouldn't eliminate it. It would put it where you see on the map under implementation phasing strategy. On the map, item 10 is where Kingston Drive is, which is already there. So it's the same route. It's just up maybe 30 feet in elevation change, and it also connects from the Rose Gardens to the zoo with very little change. I mean, the paving's there.
Okay, that's helpful.
And it's at grade.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure I understood. And then the second, if I understood your testimony, you're obviously supportive of the portion of Commissioner Fritz's amendment which emphasizes that the transportation management plan be the lead off of phase one. Does that cover your other concerns, provided you made some provisions? It needs to be a public process. It needs to be early. Does that satisfy your neighborhood's concerns?
Our neighborhood is.
Could you turn that microphone on, and everybody just leave the microphones on?
Leave the mics on.
Yeah, just turn it on and leave them on.
There you go.
Sorry. I would say yes. I mean, transportation and the issues related to it are a key concern in our neighborhood, and getting that transportation management plan right up at the front, we feel is very important, with as much public input as possible.
That's what I figured. I just wanted to make sure.
Did you also say you wanted that to be adopted by the city council? Or am I putting words in your mouth?
Sorry, the amendment to be adopted?
The transportation management plan should come to council for adoption?
He said it should go to the community.
Well, I think what I said earlier is we very much support phase one. I mean, I think would like to see a phased approach to this, because during phase one, which is now 5 years, a lot of things could change. And it seems sensible to go slowly so that adaptive, changes can be made.
Mr. Wallace, I'm glad you emphasized that, because I wanted to say when you were talking that, or when Emily Roth was talking, we don't have $92 million to do this
Yes.
plan. In fact, we have very limited funding. It was mentioned we do have the parking fees, but I know that the media is going to have on the headlines tomorrow that we're proposing $92 million of expansion. That would be nice, and we're in a very constrained budget situation, so no, we're not going to be leaping ahead with implementing any of this in a particularly expedited fashion. But what we will do is, I think we all agree that the transportation management plan is key to whatever comes next.
Can I just ask one question too, and thank you for your testimony. I want to make sure I understand your view about food in the park. And I'm struck by the fact, and maybe it's because I still have a young person at home, that when we go to parks, whether they're the parks in San Diego, Los Angeles, New York, San Francisco, wherever, we appreciate the fact that there are food options. It makes it more family friendly. And in fact, in most of the great parks that I visit, there's all kinds of food options. So is your concern generically with food in the park, or is it primarily with the picture we have in here of food trucks replacing what's now a tennis court?
I would say that our concern is more generic. With food comes garbage. With food, if it's in food carts, comes exhaust from generators. Rats are going to come when there is garbage, and there is food very close to the boundaries of the park. Portland is known as a food city. So it doesn't seem to us that it's necessary to bring food into the park when there is food nearby. And picnic baskets are certainly welcome, but we think that having food in the park goes against kind of the more natural character of the park, particularly with the options that are close by.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Council and Mayor. My name is Kristen Shorey. I've been on the Sylvan Highlands Neighborhood Association Board since 2011, and I currently serve as president. Our neighborhood shares its long eastern border with the Hoyt Arboretum, the Vietnam Veterans Memorial, the Forestry Center, the Children's Museum, and Washington Park. And in 2011 and 2012, both Arlington Heights and Sylvan Highlands were invited to participate in a series of 18 strategic planning meetings about the future of Washington Park. So that's when I began thinking about the future of Washington Park. These meetings led to the creation of the Washington Park TMA, which is now the nonprofit Explore Washington Park. Collaboration and transparency were further instilled in the stewardship of Washington Park with the addition of 2 board members on the Explore Washington Park board from Sylvan Highlands and Arlington neighborhoods, as well as 2 public at-large board members. Thank you, Commissioner Fritz. Sylvan Highlands is delighted that this collaborative effort has continued throughout the process of creating a master plan to preserve and improve our beloved natural neighborhood park. Thank you to Emily Roth and all of her team for their hard work in putting together this comprehensive plan and incorporating many thoughts and ideas expressed by the public. As the final version of Phase 1 incorporated public feedback, we believe it is now a solid start to enhancing and strengthening the long-term vitality of the natural areas of the park. Sylvan Highlands is delighted with the additions of the natural area protection, the Dark Sky Initiative, the removal of invasive species, and the addition of native plants. And we look forward to seeing the data that will be collected from Explore Washington Park's traffic study. Especially excited that it's being moved forward. With our changing, unpredictable climate, we're very concerned about wildfire. And so we're especially pleased that the resiliency plan is being put into place. One of the main goals of both Washington Park and the master plan is to get people out of their cars. On page 42 of the master plan, it states, moving cars to the edges of Washington Park, creating a pedestrian and bicycle path separate from cars, and increasing active transportation options ranked as the highest priorities from those who participated in both the in-person and online open houses. We strongly urge the council and parks to listen to the wishes of the citizens and adhere to the stated goals of the plan by closing Kingston Boulevard to cars, and use this existing road and grading for the multimodal path and the one-way shuttle route. This would allow the existing railway lines to bring back the historic beloved Washington Park train. This alternative solution has many benefits. First and foremost, it is fiscally responsible, as it utilizes existing grading and road improvements and can be done quickly, with the potential of saving millions of dollars from Phase 1. Secondly, it meets the key goals of reducing cars in the park and encourages other modes of getting through the park, serving bicyclists, pedestrians, and the shuttle. And finally, it restores a historical venue and allows several agencies to work together in its implementation. The train is a fun, memorable alternative for getting between the north and south venues of the park. I've included an email about the current state of the Washington Park rail line from Don Moore, the director of the zoo, in my submitted written testimony. He states that while the trail concept is appealing, Metro and the zoo are still a long way from a shared vision to abandon the Washington Park rail line. We understand that the archery range is important and that the archery community would like to be able to keep vehicle access. They're in the middle of Kingston. But what about the shuttle? Can we find another place within the park to set up the archery range? The benefits of closing Kingston Drive to cars warrant a thorough look at options for the archery range. The success of the shuttle is a testament to the public's ability to adapt and embrace change. Let's keep this momentum going and create a true multimodal option within the park. We agree with Arlington that the implementation of Phase 2 and Phase 3 should be addressed later with another round of public input. Sylvan Highlands strongly supports the future building of a parking lot at the south end of the park, the Westgate parking lot, just off Highway 26. It's a perfect place for people to leave their cars and begin their Washington Park experience. This location could serve as a shuttle stop as well as an external welcome food center and a food cart location. The zoo already runs shuttles from here during peak times. It's a natural way to further ease car congestion and encourage a full park experience. Thank you for your time and consideration and helping us make Washington Park the jewel of the Portland Park system. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks both for you for your testimony.
Thanks, Mayor. We're now ready for the sign-up sheet.
Very good. So how many people do we have signed up, Carla?
We have 21.
All right, so we have 21 people signed up. Is there anybody who didn't sign up who wants to? Why don't you go ahead and sign up, and then we'll close the list after that, please. So we have 22 people signed up. 3 minutes each, name for the record. I have a helpful suggestion, which is my suspicion is we're going to hear a lot of testimony that sounds similar. So if somebody has already made your points, feel free to simply say, I agree with that point, and cut your testimony short. We don't need to hear 3 minutes of the same concerns. We will duly register that. If you're a lobbyist, please state so. And if you're here representing an organization, that's helpful to know as well. Name for the record, we do not need your address.
first three, please come on up, are Kathy Rudd, Cynthia Haramyama, and Steve Bloom. And they'll be followed by Drake Snodgrass, Tracy McDonald, and Alan Barker.
Thanks for being here. Welcome.
Thank you. I'll try and stay 6 inches back. Good afternoon. Thank you, Mayor and Commissioners, for listening. My name is Kathy Rudd. I'm a member of the Portland Japanese Garden and the former board president. I'm speaking today because I'm concerned about the impact this master plan will have on our community. Commissioner Fritz, when we met on Monday, you had asked me to consider parking in a smart park downtown and taking public transportation. Honestly, it sounded very reasonable. So I mapped it out, and here's what I found. Coming from the west side, I would drive past the garden and into downtown to the smart park at 10th and Yamhill. That's about 20 minutes from my house. From there, I would walk to the MAX stop, 1 block away. Then I would take the MAX to the Providence Park station. That takes another 10 to 15 minutes. I'd get off the MAX and wait for bus number 63. Now that bus only runs once an hour. However, my understanding is that there could be a Washington Park shuttle that would come more frequently, say maybe every 30 minutes. Assuming it does, that would roughly take another 30 minutes. That would take me to the Japanese Garden, where I would take their shuttle to get up the hill, which usually takes 5 to 10 minutes. So already I've been in transit for over an hour. By the time I'm ready to leave, I would have to buy a new fare and do the whole process in reverse. When I added it up for me and my husband, we would pay $15 for parking and transit, and we spent more time in transit than we have in the garden. And then I thought about my 86-year-old mom, who has had a hard time walking up and down stairs, and how difficult all those transfers would be for her. I thought about the members who come in the morning just before work to get a little dose of tranquility before they start their day. I thought about the impact that this plan would have on all of our community, and it felt like the opposite of what Portland is all about. Commissioner Fritz, you mentioned in our meeting that parks like Yellowstone National Park are eliminating parking inside the park. But the difference between our own Washington Park and places like Yellowstone or Zion National Park is that first and foremost, Washington Park serves a city, our city, Portland, and the people who live in and around it. One of the best things about Portland is the easy access we all have to beautiful green spaces like Washington Park. Easy access to green spaces keeps our citizens healthy and active. It keeps our city livable. Easy access creates community. Please don't treat us like a group of tourists. Please keep Portland special. Thank you.
Thank you. Could I just ask a follow-up question? Because it's my understanding, having heard the parks director speak, that the number of parking places in the park through, where did Mike go?
Yeah, it's not going down.
It stays the same. Is that what you said?
Yeah, the concern is the parking very close to the Japanese gardens will be less.
So it's not the number of spaces, it's the location that concerns you. I see.
But just to clarify, I wouldn't, if I was taking transit, I would not get off the MAX to get on at the 63 bus. You take the MAX to the park, and then there's going to be an enhanced shuttle service. Because I agree, that would not make any sense at all.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and commissioners, and thank you to many of the commissioners or their staff who met with us in the past couple of weeks. My name is Cynthia Hariyama. I'm the Deputy Director at the Portland Japanese Garden. I'm also the Board President of Explore Washington Park, but I'm speaking on behalf of the garden today. Over the past 18 months during this master plan process, the Portland Japanese Garden and the other cultural institutions, TriMet and Explore Washington Park, have all repeatedly voiced our concerns that the Washington Park master plan was not addressing what our community is most concerned about, which is access to the places within Washington Park. As recently as February 5th, three of the cultural institutions, including the zoo and the Japanese garden, submitted a letter to Portland Parks reiterating the same concerns which we feel have not been addressed. At that time, TriMet also told us that under the current iteration of the master plan, that they would not be able to service the park. These were all internal conversations because we respect Portland Parks and all the hard work that they have put into this process. The 11th hour answer from Parks was to add some language in the master plan that would task a further process with addressing some of these issues. Yet we still see a problem because we feel the cart was put before the horse. The number one problem in Washington Park today, and presumably for the next 30 years, is access. How people get to the places within the 480-acre park that they actually want to visit. So it seems backwards to get to do anything but solve access first. We're happy to see that in the past 2 weeks, since we publicly voiced our disapproval of the master plan, that Portland Parks has addressed some of the concerns of the zoo and TriMet. It's noteworthy that no such commitments have been made to the Japanese garden. The fact that these conciliations from Portland Parks are coming within the last 2 weeks illustrates to us that this plan is still incomplete. 44% of the projects in the master plan are now contingent upon that future planning effort. Other critical parts of the plan, such as year-round shuttles, enhanced shuttles, have no cost estimates or plans within the master plan. We already know what it costs to run shuttles a third of the year. It's $577,000 a year. So to run year-round shuttles and have to run them to more places has got to be over $1 million additional that will have to be spent on shuttles. We ask that the City Council accept the master plan today as a work in progress, but delay approval of the master plan until it is complete and provides viable solutions to enable our community to access the many special places within Washington Park. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mayor Wheeler, Commissioners. Thank you for having us here today. My name is Steve Bloom. I'm the CEO of the Portland Japanese Garden. And I think we're all in agreement, and we hear a lot about the transportation issues and parking issues and all of that in the park, and we are in agreement that that is the biggest concern that we have. And it would be great if we could just triple the parking. We know that's never going to happen, and we don't ask for that. We do have concerns, as you had asked, Mayor, about the proximity of that parking. We have a different audience on our end of the park from the other side of the park. And so while the parking on the other side of the park has maintained its proximity, of course those organizations are going to be thrilled with that. Ours, in fact, are being displaced farther and farther away from the garden through this plan. That wouldn't be so bad if our users were similar to the other side of the park, which tend to be more active users, younger users, families who can get around more easily. But in fact, 60% of our visitors are right here from Portland, and they tend to be 65 years or older. And so those users recently, as you know, have invested $37 million in the expansion of the Japanese garden. But I don't believe that they invested that money with the idea that we would, through this plan, be making it harder for them to get to the garden, for them to access the garden. And so yes, there will be shuttle service, but when you use that shuttle service, and if you took a bus and it's on and off one bus, a public bus, to get to the parking lot, and then onto a shuttle there, over to our shuttle, onto our shuttle, off of our shuttle, and then do it all over again, if you are 65 or 70 or 80 years old, which is what our side of the park users tend to be, that's a challenge. That's a challenge. So for you and me, no problem. I'm happy to park farther away, but that's not the reality of our users. And so to take that entire group and population of users to the park, and by the way, this year will be 500,000. And 17,000 members to the garden. So it's not a small number. And we tend to be the #1 tourist attraction in the city of Portland as well. To continue to put barriers for our side of the park is something that we have concerns about. And so we believe there's many good parts to this plan, and we endorse many parts of the plan. But, and as Cynthia said, we've seen that many parts have been addressed, but we feel that these issues have not been addressed. We feel like they came to our board and our board expressed that and that those things were ignored. So we want to continue this conversation. We want to delay the approval of this plan until we have a chance to have further conversations around this. It should be telling that there is not a unified, rousing endorsement of this plan by the organizations within the park. That should be telling. Of course, I can only speak for the garden, but I hope you hear our frustration that the community has donated $37 million to this, only to be met with more barriers to enjoying the fruits of their labor. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Could I ask a question of Steve or Cynthia or Kathy? So I'm sympathetic to what you say, but I also want to play devil's advocate a little bit.
Sure.
Any thought of the garden running its own shuttle down to the lower level parking lot?
Well, we do already run a shuttle.
No, I mean, not the lower level,
a direct
the future parking lot.
Sure, but I think we have to have those conversations. It's an expensive prospect, right? We're already running our own shuttle. Now to take it further, again, it adds staff for us and time and vehicle maintenance, and because now we're doubling the distance that we have to send our own shuttle and the time it takes for people to get up once they got on the shuttle. So we need time to study that and have those conversations, but we were never through this process given the opportunity to really explore any of those options.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
We'll get staff back at the end.
Okay, good. Thank you. Appreciate
Thank
all
you.
three of you. Next three, please, Carla.
Are Drake Snodgrass, Tracy McDonald, and Alan Barker, and they'll be followed by Hillary McKenzie, Lisa Coliff, and Mary Vogel.
Sir, would you like to start for us?
Yes.
Thank you, sir.
Council and mayors, welcome, and thank you again for this opportunity. And I'm speaking to you as a person who grew up in the city from the time I was 0 to 13.
Thank you, sir. Could you say your name for the record?
Tracy McDonald.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, and my great-grandparents kind of supported and in the 20s worked with the Bears Zoo activity and were in the Rosarian Society. My grandparents worked in the time that we built, and I contributed a few cents to the OMSI building and to that area. And we've been frequent users of the park. And I would support the majority of what you're trying to do here. I also want to state that I work on the transportation board in my city in county of Clatsop at Sunset. And we did, in the past, felt that rail transport of people and really wasn't necessary to Seaside anymore historically. So we abandoned that and removed those tracks. And now if you try to leave the city of Seaside on Sunday or that afternoon, it takes you a considerable amount of time. I would support and try to realize the improvement of continuing the rails in their form and make it more efficient, maybe make a frequency change to make that better. That would really support transportation and people movement. And you wouldn't be in the situation where we're in.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. My name is Alan Barker. Mayor Wheeler, Commissioner Fritz, and colleagues. My wife and I are neighbors, frequent users, and fervent supporters of the Japanese International Rose Gardens, and we walk the trails almost every day of the week. I've read the master plan, attended meetings, including the listening session just last evening with Explore Washington Park. Others have spoken more eloquently than I can about the need to review the transportation issues, and I echo those needs. And I think I'll stop right there. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Mayor Wheeler, commissioners. My name is Drake Snodgrass. I'm a local business owner and a lifetime Oregonian. I'm also a volunteer board member at the Portland Japanese Garden. And as board treasurer, I'm concerned about the current vision of the Washington Park Master Plan, specifically how it will impact the Japanese Garden's revenue stream. I'm treasurer, so you might imagine. From what I've seen, the master plan only addresses about half of the park's access problems for the future. And to be frank, it does not have very good solutions for the north side of the park, where the Japanese and the Rose Gardens are located. With our recent Japanese garden expansion, the community, as was mentioned earlier, invested $37 million in the park, in the garden, in the Japanese garden, on the assumption that people would have full and easy access to the Japanese garden. Maybe not the right assumption, but it sure was something that seemed to be a logical and good assumption. Not only does this plan not make it easier, it actually makes getting to the garden much more difficult by moving parking a quarter of a mile away. So a quarter of a mile away maybe doesn't sound like too far, too much, but there's an elevation change of 200 feet. And so that's like walking up 20 flights of stairs. A bit of an effort for a walk, maybe not so much for a shuttle, but walking is one of the anticipated ways to get through the park. The Japanese Garden is a nonprofit, and we rely on our admission revenue to sustain the organization. And its purposes is to create a place of culture, understanding, cultural understanding, a place where people can connect to nature, something special to my heart, and a place to experience peace. I think that's something that we could all use a little bit more of. This place is good for the community, and it's good for our local economy too. We work with local businesses for goods used in the cafe, the gift store, and in the garden itself. And we also employ 103 full-time employees year-round with full benefits. That number goes up in the summertime, and all of these jobs are above minimum wage by a significant amount. So let me illustrate how this could truly impact us with some statistics. Taking away the parking along Southwest Kingston would take away about 60 spots, not counting ADA parking. Those 60 spots are responsible for as much as 36% of our admission revenue. About half, on average, drive and then attend the garden. And it's fewer in the summer, it's more because local people in the wintertime visit the garden. So even if you lose half of that 36%, say 18% of our admission revenue, over $1 million of our revenue is gone. So we're asking the council to delay approval of this master plan until it's complete. It realistically solves the access challenges in the park, and it ensures access through a variety of solutions to places where people already want to go.
Thank you.
So thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner Fish.
I apologize, I missed the beginning of your testimony, and if I ask you a question that's already been answered, I apologize for that too. But so that technically what we're being asked today to do is to accept the report?
We would like you to accept the report, not adopt it, but accept it.
It is my understanding we're not adopting it, we're accepting it. And
that's what we are doing.
And I just want to be clear, that means we are literally transferring it from the Parks Bureau to the council, but we're not adopting it. That's not the motion before us. I just want to make clear on that. But I'd like to talk to you about the Japanese Garden for a moment. And obviously, congratulations for all the work that you've done, and now it looks like your architect's about to design for the Olympics. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, thank you.
Would you remind me, how many spots are there now in the dedicated parking that's part of the redesign for the Japanese Garden?
I don't have that totally accurately, but around 40, I think, is.
So, Commissioner, what I'm proposing is to have the testimony, all of it, and then we'll bring staff back to get your detailed questions answered.
Okay, and just then one other observation.
34 is the number.
Pardon me?
34 spots.
Okay, and another question I'll have for staff is, the parking would be lost under this plan that's adjacent to the tennis courts, when I lived in Grant Park and used to drive to Washington Park, I don't ever remember being able to get a spot along that way because it was always filled with people that got there before me. Maybe they were there because they were playing tennis, maybe they just were early birds, but I never had much luck finding parking there. And I'm curious about how meaningful that parking is generally. But my understanding is this proposal before us at least preserves the parking that's part of the redesign, so that would remain, correct?
It does, yeah. Our visitors turn around about every 2 hours,
okay.
and I come to the garden often, and
yeah.
I have a different experience. I always have found a spot, and I'm thankful for the fact that I can.
Well, I'm going to get a consultation with you privately, because you obviously have some strategy that I need to know about. And again, separate and apart from the decisions we'll be making over the next year, I hope you understand how proud the city is in the work that has been done at the Japanese Garden, because it's put us on the map globally, and we're extremely proud of that.
Well, thank you, and we love our relationship with the city, and Mike is a great guy, good friend, great plan, just need to slow down a little bit and work with it. Thank you.
Thank you all, appreciate it. Next three, please, Carla.
Are Hillary McKenzie, Lisa Coliff, and Mary Vogel, and they'll be followed by Anna Goldrich, Don Moore, and Carol Mayer Reed.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Hillary McKenzie. I serve on the board of Arlington Heights, and I'm president of Neighbors West Northwest Neighborhood Coalition. My opinions today are those of mine and are not authorized specifically by those boards. I strongly support the testimony of Arlington Heights and Sylvan Highlands neighborhood associations. Our neighborhood has been asking for a master plan for Washington Park for decades, and Parks has produced one. I have also strongly supported public involvement in planning for the park. You might remember I came before City Council in 2014, appealing the lack of public notice and public involvement in the decision to expand the commercial presence of the Japanese Garden within Washington Park. In the past, any special interest group that brought money to the table has been able to build within the park in spite of public objections and the resultant loss of public open space. The Bureau of Parks has come a long way in improving their public outreach for the Washington Park Master Plan. Public notification has been comprehensive. There have been opportunities for public input. But that said, there is room for improvement in allowing for public input. Much of the proposed development in the Washington Park Master Plan, particularly in phases 2 and 3, arose out of the survey for the plan and open houses held to discuss the plan. There's considerable public objection to the proposed development in the later phases of the plan. The survey that circulated online and in the public forums had many multiple choice questions where one could select which 10 or so development options were preferred, but there were never options for no development, maintained green spaces, none of the above, or blank. I and many others I have spoken to all had similar frustrations with the survey. We could either not answer the questions or select the least damaging options. Most of us wrote additional comments at the end, so the starting premise for the master plan was always how to develop, not if development was a good idea in the park. And by development, I mean standalone attractions that would likely require an admission fee, increased paving, and removal of natural green spaces. The proposed new development within the master plan is driving much of the $94 million price tag for the execution of the plan. The neighborhoods surrounding and adjacent to Washington Park are extremely park-rich. Over 90% of these neighborhood households are within a half-mile walking distance to a park. Meanwhile, most of East Portland and parts of North Portland are severely park deficient. Less than 75% of households in those neighborhoods have access to a park within a half mile. The Bureau of Parks has a $430 million maintenance backlog. The Bureau of Parks was also asked for across-the-board 5% budget cuts this year. It is impossible to reconcile the high cost of the master plan build-out with the realities of the park budget and park needs citywide. Lastly, I support the need for a comprehensive transportation management plan as called for in phase 1 of the master plan. This should have a component for public review and input. One of the concerns with the Japanese Garden commercial expansion was the impact on traffic, parking, circulation, and emergency vehicle access in and around the park. I'm almost done.
2 more sentences, then we need to wrap it up. There's a
Okay.
lot of people waiting.
You will recall that representatives of the Japanese Garden testified the transportation impacts from their expansion would be minimal. They presented a traffic study to support that view. Neighborhoods objected that the traffic study was completed in November and did not reflect future reservoir improvements. Consultants often develop reports that support the goals of their clients. So we think it's essential that there's continued public input, both in the transportation management plan and the review of such, and then the ongoing phases of the park. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Thank you. Good afternoon.
Hi, I'm Lisa Califf, and I live near Washington Park. My neighbor told me that my comments are radical, so I just want to prepare you. So I'm going to talk about parking.
Love it.
World class is a phrase that is used to describe aspirations for Washington Park. Washington Park is truly a beautiful place, but if we want a world-class park, we must avoid creating a world-class parking problem. Parking lots are not world-class solutions. They are not a 21st century answer to the problem of increasing vehicle traffic. As more and more people come to enjoy Washington Park, the master plan must ideate other methods for getting people to the park and moving them around once they arrive. Portland is already behind the 8 ball on this issue. Traffic into the park is nightmarish. Metering was introduced in 2014, but has it helped? Metering revenue paid for the master plan has provided rangers and a shuttle, but it has also funded an entirely new bureaucracy. And though the mission of Explore Washington Park is to address transportation issues, the use of individual vehicles for accessing the park has not been meaningfully reduced. Some say that metering has made parking worse as drivers avoid meters to park on nearby streets. Parking lots and metering are an obsolete fix. They are a way to obtain revenue from vehicles coming into the park, not a way to discourage them. It will be difficult to wean ourselves from cars and meters because we've attached a revenue stream. Indeed, we have people whose jobs depend upon the funds generated by metering, that is, by every car that drives to Washington Park and parks there. Moving vehicles to the edge of the park is celebrated as a solution to congestion, but this only shifts vehicles to other communities. Off-site parking lots are not a panacea. They merely transfer the stress and blight to a different location and then add the burden of shuttling people. If you've ever been to Disneyland, you've seen the sea of concrete that has been poured for cars. It is an armpit of ugliness. We can't let this happen to Washington Park. Yet, death by increments seems to be the de facto policy. One more lot here, a few spaces there. Additional parking is simply adding a lane to a freeway. It is a retrograde formula that has no place in a modern plan. Why do we look backward for solutions that have already failed? If we continue to accommodate vehicles, there will be no end to the numbers that will come. Washington Park has reached saturation, and the master plan must innovate away from individual vehicle use to access the park. We can be more creative. Public transit must cost less than driving and parking. We have a max stop at the zoo, and a zoo train should be revived to move people within the park. This is a place to start. At a minimum, Explore Washington Park should encourage all Portland residents, with carrots, not sticks, to use public transit. And I have a slogan: Explore Washington Park, but leave your car at home. I have more, call me. The way forward, truly the future for any world-class park, is to cultivate strategies that limit and ultimately inhibit individual vehicle use as a primary mode of access, so that we can all enjoy the peace and serenity of the park. As Portland grows, we must drive less if we are to enjoy our lives. Let's create a world-class park by being the first truly innovative American city to renegotiate its relationship with cars.
I hope you stay engaged. Thank you.
That was great, but now we're all going to be thinking of slogans. So it could be Washington Park, but not that kind.
Oh, boy.
Sorry, I went down that rabbit
Ted, stick with your day job. Stick with your day job.
Good afternoon.
Thank you, Mayor.
So I'm Mary Vogel, speaking for myself and my planning consulting business, Plan Green. I live in downtown, where I'm also on the Downtown Neighborhood Association Land Use and Transportation Committee, and also active in Oregon Walks. I've led a number of trips to Washington Park from downtown for Sierra Club and Oregon Mycological Society. Since I gave up my car a few years ago, the park has become extremely important for my mental, spiritual, and physical health, and I walk there nearly every weekend. On one of those weekends, President's Day, February 18th of this year, I was hit by a car as I was coming back from the park So I am especially interested in the neighborhood's proposal to remove private cars from Southwest Kingston Drive. Just like the driver who hit me, and he was making a right turn on red from Southwest Vista onto Southwest Park Place, I found that many drivers on Southwest Kingston don't watch for crossing passengers, or they expect pedestrians to yield the road to them and not vice versa. So I agree wholeheartedly that removing private cars from Southwest Kingston Drive and converting it to a multimodal bike pedestrian shuttle path should be included in phase 1 of the plan to eliminate that $10 million line item from the phase 1 budget. I suggest you put some of that money into moving the archery range to a new location, reopening the zoo train, and perhaps creating more habitat for wildlife and a more enjoyable environment for those of us seeking to use the park as more passive recreation activities by removing invasive species and replanting native species that are now proposed in phase 1. I've been sending comments on this plan since I first read about it while visiting the park. After taking the online survey, I was dismayed that it seemed that none of my input had been taken into account. Many thanks to my neighbors from Arlington Heights and Sylvan Highlands neighborhood associations who served on committees and fought for these things. I am now pleased with the additions of natural areas, natural protection, the Dark Sky Initiative, removal of invasive species, and the addition of native plants and a resiliency plan. I have long thought that Washington Park should do much better by our native wildlife, though I must admit that I really enjoyed watching the nesting barred owls until a veritable army of crows with many battalions chased them off. I agree with Arlington Heights Neighborhood Associate. Well, in any case, I just wanted to finish my sentence. I agree with Arlington Heights Neighborhood Association that implementation of phase 2 and 3 should be addressed later with another round of public input.
Thank you.
Mary, I'm very sad to hear that you got hit, and I hope you're doing okay.
Oh, you know, I didn't hear you because I took these things off, so what did...
I just said, I'm sorry, I'm sad to hear that you got hit, and I hope you're doing okay after the car crash.
Oh, I'm also very resilient, thank you.
You are resilient, that's true.
Next 3, please.
Are Anna Goldrich, Dawn Moore, and Carol Mayer Reed, and they'll be followed by Christy Galen, Ruth Shelley, and Kathy Godell.
It's all yours. All right. Anna Goldrich on behalf of the Hoyt Arboretum Friends, Executive Director, and Mayor and Commissioners, I appreciate this opportunity to be here today to express our support for the Washington Park Master Plan. And just want to start by saying we really appreciated the extensive public input process for the plan. It was very important for the park neighbors and for many of our members who had many concerns about the plan. The Hoyt Arboretum Friends supports all of the planned improvements outlined for the Arboretum, and we believe they will greatly enhance the visitor experience at Hoyt. And we're pleased that most of these projects will be tackled in phase 1 of the plan. With limited time, I'm just going to mention a few of our favorite features of the plan. The safety improvements for Fairview Boulevard and Fisher Road have been needed for a long time, as these are increasingly busy roads that cut right through Hoyt. We expect Fisher to see increased traffic when the bridge over Burnside is built. We're excited about that bridge. It'll be an exciting new feature for the park, and this plan creates an opportunity to put some needed infrastructure like parking and trail connections in place before congestion and safety problems occur. We're ready to partner with Portland Parks to find funding to pave a final section of an ADA accessible trail that will run from the Max station through to the end of our Bristlecone Pine Trail. And I can't think of another place in Portland where you can come out of a Max station and go on a 2.5-mile hike through the woods. So we're excited to get that finished. The commitment to move the natural areas maintenance staff out of the Hoyt Arboretum Visitor Center is the most important change for us. This will cut by more than half the number of staff working out of our building and create much needed space for us to engage volunteers and visitors. Our youth education programs doubled in 2017, and we expect them to double again this year. We are serving kids from around the city and really from around the region, and half of the students visiting Hoyt Arboretum this spring are visiting from underserved schools with the assistance of our transportation funds. When we can move these extra park staff to new offices, we will be excited to work with Portland Parks to create a true hub and a worthy visitor center at Hoyt Arboretum. We imagine an engaging place for visitors to explore, an educational resource for scientists, plant enthusiasts in the community, and most importantly for the thousands of children who visit Hoyt Arboretum each year to learn about trees and the role our collections play in global biodiversity. And a future tree canopy walk will create another exciting educational opportunity. This April 25th is the 90th birthday of Hoyt Arboretum, and 2028 will be our 100th. Both offer unique opportunities to engage our members and the public for the benefit of Hoyt Arboretum. Our partnership with Portland Parks is strong, and we expect that to get even stronger as we work together to bring these elements of the plan to life.
Thank you.
Thank you for your partnership too.
Good afternoon.
Hi, Mr. Mayor and City Commissioners. I'm Dr. Don Moore. I'm Director of Oregon Zoo. Thank you for having me here today. We've appreciated the opportunity to work with Portland Parks and Rec staff and management and our fellow cultural institutions in the park and the Transportation Management Association Explore Washington Park on this revision to the Washington Park Master Plan. The Oregon Zoo is a treasured world-renowned destination and primary destination within the park, as you know. Over the past decades, we've gone from being a modest-sized community zoo to a world-class education and conservation leader among zoos across the globe. We are the largest paid attraction in Oregon, visited by more than 1.5 million adults and children every year. And as such, the Oregon Zoo is a great contributor to the economy of Portland and the metro region, bringing $101 million per year to this community. We attract the greatest number of visitors to Washington Park and drive the parking revenue that was used to fund this plan revision, as well as management and repairs throughout the park. In 2008, our community made a significant investment by granting the Oregon Zoo a $125 million public bond, which is enabling us to remodel more than 40% of our campus. As a result, we've replaced aging, outdated facilities with stunning new award-winning habitats, an amazing new education center, and green infrastructure that saves energy and water. We're honored and humbled by the enthusiastic support we receive from our community. Our greatest challenge is access. People struggle to get to the zoo. We have the capacity to welcome many more visitors and share with them our important conservation message, but are constrained by the limitations of Washington Park's current transportation and parking systems. Our patrons are mostly families with young children. And as you know, for those of us who have raised kids, it's hard to get around with strollers and bags and extra coats and things like that. But as a conservation organization and part of Metro, we're deeply committed to the use of transit. The practical truth is that it isn't feasible for many of our visitors to Washington Park to come by MAX or train at this time. While the master plan identifies improved access as a primary goal, the zoo, along with other cultural institutions, agree that the master plan as it stands is incomplete. It has not adequately addressed or resolved our access challenges. So I really appreciate the amendment that you offered, Commissioner Fritz, and the other support we're hearing about transportation access. So the master plan proposes that the TMP, once approved by Explore Washington Park, would be adopted by this council as an addendum. And we request that you commit to supporting completion of the transportation management plan and not just add it as an addendum, but fully integrate it into the master plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. I'm Carol Mayer-Reed. I'm a landscape architect who's worked in Portland for over 40 years. I've worked on parks and open space and transportation projects, the East Bank Esplanade, the Orange Line, and attractions like OMSI, Oregon Zoo, and the Portland Children's Museum. And I was asked by Portland Parks and Rec to be on the Champions Committee. I've followed the process, I've been part of it, I've given advice along the way, and I generally support the plan, and I've seen it adapt in keeping with many of the discussions and requests that have been made. But one thing I've learned in my career is ambitions, hopes, and dreams are unlimited, but physical space is not. It has limits, it has boundaries, and there's a carrying capacity to what can be accommodated. I've spent my whole career, in fact, matching up clients and organizations' ambitions with their physical spaces and their budgets. So obviously, I don't need to tell you that Portland's experiencing huge growing pains all around our city, and we have to adjust our expectations about the reliance of private automobiles. They clog up our roadways, and they take up a lot of physical space. Now, I learned to take my 2 grandchildren to the zoo and to the Children's Museum using the MAX. For them and for me, riding the train is really half the fun. And yet the attractions in Washington Park remain passionate about the city meeting their demands for parking. And it's no surprise to me that the parking issue has risen to the top of the stack. In fact, I knew it would be. The transportation component of the master plan is key to the long-term success of the park, and there's a definite carrying capacity to Washington Park with its topography, its sensitive forests, its gardens, and obviously we have to make choices and place value on physical space. We simply can't make more of it. At least we haven't figured that out. The master plan works well to value the land while seeking to balance the demand for use, and one example was to eliminate the sports field to gain some additional parking, while another was to relocate the tennis courts to gain open space for arrival and use by visitors in one of the hubs. And so I'll just pause a second and tell you, 3 years ago, I studied Japanese gardens with the University of Oregon in Kyoto, and I toured remarkable landscapes and exquisite treasures of the culture. And in Japan, like many other places, when the crowds became heavy, the experience was significantly diminished. The peace was gone. And it became more important for managing myself within the crowds around me and less about the landscape that I was there to see. We all know about that if you go to Multnomah Falls on a Sunday in the summer. And I've been a member of the Japanese Garden, and there's no doubt the expansion it offers is a world-class example, but it too has a carrying capacity even within its own gates, and I hope they have a good plan for managing the 500,000 visitors to ensure that high-quality experience. I'm sure its leadership is planning for this. But they have to work together with parks to be able to manage this issue. And I just don't want to make sure that no one should expect Portland Parks and Recreation to pave more of our paradise to get there.
Thank you, all 3 of you.
Thank you.
Next 3, please, Carla.
Are Christy Galen, Ruth Shelley, and Kathy Godell, and they'll be followed by Marshall Gannett, Sherry Brown, and Dana Karstensen.
And while they're making their way up, I'll just put a reminder out again, if anybody is here waiting for the time certain item at 4 p.m. related to the Central City 2035 plan, we are not going to discuss that today. That's going to be continued to March 22nd at 2 p.m. Good afternoon.
Hey, so I'm Christy Galen, and I appreciate all the efforts that Parks has made and their consultant has made to protect our park. And as a 3rd-generation Portlander, I have been coming to the park since before Packy was born, for those of you who know Packy, or knew. I also represented Arlington Heights neighborhood on the Champion Committee. And I've attended every meeting, every open house, and participated in every survey that Parks created. I feel that the public opinion used to justify the master plan has been a bit misrepresented by biased surveys that favored development and commercialization of our public open space. There was never a survey option for maintaining and preserving our park, only choices for new development preferences. I agree with Michael from the Arlington Heights neighborhood about most everything he said. And I will add to that that I think his intent was the food carts that are planned on the north side of the park. The north side of the park is really a unique place. It is like the closest place to the city. It's where you can walk from the city and where a lot of people come up through the trails and visit the park to find quiet, to find peace, to to look at the roses, to photograph the roses, to smell the roses, to visit the Japanese garden. They don't come for food. Food is so close by. I think food near the zoo, other food options, is probably the intent of the plan, but to put food carts on the north end of the park where they could be a fire hazard. We all know Santa Rosa, we know the Eagle Creek fire. We don't need food or the potential for fire hazard or to increase rats or to increase crows or to increase garbage on the north end. It'll be a huge maintenance issue, I think, for garbage. I do support having food on the north end like it is now. There's a small cart, but if that could be moved to the Depot Cafe, that would be a win-win. I love that part of the plan, and it's further away from the neighborhood. The other part I really like about the plan is the Dark Sky Initiative. I think that shows a lot of forethought. It's a great educational experience for the public to learn about night sky and being able to see stars, and also it's better for wildlife. And I'll leave this with you. But the other thing is there's a bike trail that's proposed on a landslide area in the forest. And if you know single track bike trails, they become 2-lane bike trails, they become 6 to 12 feet wide and they cause erosion. I'm just hoping that if you allow something like that or want something like that, that you'll look at the environmental impacts that they would cause.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mayor Wheeler, City Commissioners. I'm Ruth Shelley, Executive Director of Portland Children's Museum, and I'd like to share with you 4 things: a thank you, a reassurance, a concern, and a request. First, thank you for Portland Children's Museum's long and positive relationship with Portland Parks and Recreation. The museum grew as a parks program from 1946 until 2001, when Rotary Club of Portland raised $10 million to move us to the former OMSI building in Washington Park, and we became our own independent nonprofit. Portland Parks became our landlord and was equally generous with a 30-year lease for $10. Without this dual support, we would never have grown to the organization we are today, welcoming nearly 300,000 visitors per year and operating a thriving preschool, a K-5 public charter school, and a research center within this facility. Sadly, that facility is aging. I want to offer reassurance that where the Washington Park Master Plan calls for our building to be demolished and replaced by a parking lot, we get it. I want you and everyone gathered here today to understand that Parks is not forcing us to move, only to be prepared that in 13 years our lease will not be renewed. My board and I agree with Parks' assessment that further capital investment in our 63-year-old building is not warranted, especially with the city's commitment to environmental sustainability and seismic resilience within its structures. However, this raises a concern about current access to and parking within Washington Park, as you've heard many people express. But for us, during the next decade, as we seek a new home and launch a capital campaign, it will be critical for Portland Children's Museum to prove itself worthy of financial and community support. However, that effort will be for naught if families can't get to Washington Park or find a place to park. I look forward to City Council supporting development of the Transportation Master Plan and approving it as an amendment with full integration into the Washington Park Master Plan so that our present can inform our future. Finally, a request. My board of directors, our staff, and the families we serve are so grateful to Portland Parks and Rec for the support that they have provided for the past 72 years. As partners, we have built a beloved community resource that has a national, in fact, an international reputation for excellence. One sentence: we respectfully ask that the city continue its support of Portland Children's Museum through the transition to our new home, so that wherever we land, we will remain partners in success for the sake of our city's children and families. Thank you.
Thank you.
I could just ask Ruth the question. You answered a lot of questions that were kind of running through my mind about the Children's Museum, so thank you for your very magnanimous testimony. Does the Children's Museum have any desire to stay in Washington Park, albeit in a new facility? Is that an option or not?
As part of the Washington Park planning process, the planners actually looked to see if there might be another place within the park that we might go, and truly there was not. And so we are accepting of our fate. We just hope that the city will help us as we seek that new home. And we're hoping that we can be even more accessible in our new location.
Okay, thank you.
When I talked with Michelle earlier this week, we talked about there's a lot of great opportunities in various different places that could increase accessibility to the Children's Museum and perhaps other wonderful new partnerships. So I'm certainly very appreciative of what we've done before, and we've got 13 years, as you said, to find a new spot that's going to be another good home for you.
A lucky number.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
I'm Kathy Gettle. Thank you, Mayor Wheeler, Amanda Fritz, Commissioner Fritz, and the rest of the commissioners, and Mike Abadi and Emily. We appreciate being able to talk about the plan. I'm here as a bicycle rider, a hiker, 34-year resident, always living near Washington Park because I love it. The peace and tranquility of the park has often been ruined in recent years by the success of the park. The top 3 attractions in Portland are all on the north side of the park. So I'm sure you read TripAdvisor and see, there they are, 1, 2, and 3, the Washington Park itself, the Japanese Garden, and the Rose Gardens. Looking at the park with this longer view, I feel the park has only deteriorated and diverged from Olmsted's principles in my generation's stewardship. We need a master plan and we need to adhere to it. Commissioner Fritz did a better job summarizing the history than I could, so I'll skip over all that. But I will say, Winston Churchill said, those who fail to learn from history are doomed to repeat it. So from what I've seen, the 1981 master plan was virtually ignored. I'm not aware of any proposal for a development project in the last 33 years that's been turned down. Individual organizations with the funding and political support trump any negative impact on the park on the whole. There isn't that overall, looking at that long-term ability for the park to be the tranquil place that many of us enjoy and desire to be in. So there needs to be this long-term perspective on stewardship of the park. And I'm going to give some current examples, not to be saying bad things about the organizations that did them. They optimize what they can do. We all do. I optimize my things, and the organizations do too. So the beautiful Japanese Garden expansion is world-class, but it came as an expense to the park experience and neighborhood livability. The increases in visitors have caused increased traffic congestion and parking issues in the neighborhood. The expansion took away the most magical trail in the park from the citizens of Portland. It's now inside the park, and it's been replaced with a trail that's only 3 feet wide. It goes along a road next to a fence. It has a steeper pitch. It includes stairs that are less accessible, with those of us facing knee replacements. And, oh dear. Anyway, the water and sewage requirements caused the trailhead at Fairview and Champlain to be left with a trail that's at an unsafe pitch and bad rocks. And we've got a big, lovely silver box that makes it ugly. There are industrial lights now. They're on all night. It's not dark sky in the Japanese Garden, and the people who live adjacent have lights coming into their home. Garbage trucks back down the road and load beepers in the early morning hours. I support the need for the master plan and appreciate the effort that it took to come here, but we need an independent transportation management plan with the implementation of phase 1 and the maintenance and sustainability activities focused. We need to do something different than we did in the past. And to quote Mike Abadi, we must all do all that is needed to ensure this amazing place will be available, accessible, and beautiful for our children's
Thank you.
children.
Appreciate
Sorry, I
it.
went over.
Thank you, all three of you. Next three, please.
Are Marshall Gannett, Sherry Brown, and Dana Karstensen, and they'll be followed by J.M. Zwerts, Andy Jansley, and Dean N. Alterman. Looks like Marshall had to leave, so we'll go with J.M. Zwerts.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. My name is Dana Karstensen. First and foremost, I'm an Oregon Zoo employee, but I would like to state I'm speaking as a public citizen, not as an employee or representative of Metro.
Thank you.
Since 2013, I've been an employee at the Oregon Zoo, and for much of that time, I've been a station master. Station master is the one who loads and unloads the zoo train. I estimate I've been a public servant of over 100,000 riders, probably closer, maybe around 250,000 riders. In that time, I've had hundreds, if not thousands, of people complain to me that they aren't able to experience the full route anymore. They complain about just a 6-minute route. The reason why they complain about not being able to experience the full route is not because of themselves, it's because they bring their children, but more often than not, their grandchildren to ride that route with them so they can experience what they experienced as a child themselves. That is truly magical because we cannot find that anywhere else. What other things can you really do in this area that you can give to your grandchildren or your children that you experienced as a child yourself and have that and relive your childhood once again? It's rare, if anywhere. And so that's why I have so much passion to fix this full route. I understand that the Oregon Zoo wants to invest in its conservation mission. I respect that, I understand it. I understand City Portland's hesitation to invest and repair it when they don't directly benefit from it because the zoo train tickets go to Metro. That's why I myself and my cohort, my mentor, Ellen Eno, are willing to actually start up a nonprofit and fundraise to help both the City of Portland and Metro solve this issue, come together. We're willing to do a lot of legwork to fundraise this money so we can provide this magical experience to the thousands of people who have spoken to me and my coworkers, that they want it again, and we want to provide that to them again. So if you can work with us and work with Metro and work with your own planning department so we can make it happen, I'm willing to work real hard to make it happen too. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I have to ask, are you a member of Laborers 483?
I am. I'm a union shop steward at Laborers Local 483.
So knowing the kinds of wages that Laborers 483 gets, even despite the good work that the union does, it's really remarkable that you have that much passion for your job and are showing up here on your own time to advocate for the people that you serve. So thank you very much.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
I'm with you, by the way. Totally.
Thank you.
We're going to ask that question at the end about the train.
Oh, excellent.
Hello, my name is Sherry Brown, and I'm not here in any capacity authorized by the zoo. However, I am an employee there. I'm here as an advocate for the Washington Park and Zoo Railway. I brought with me a picture of me and my grandparents on the train, and here's a picture of my granddaughter by the train, and I'd like to continue that tradition. I'd just like to say that the train is a revenue situation. It's sustainable, and the infrastructure is, for the most part, already there. Unfortunately, we have no current concrete answer to provide the riders, and it's hard to handle good customer service when the riders are disappointed and upset upon exiting the train. We do have the comment cards, and thousands of those have been submitted. We're not asking for anything new. This train is already there, and the tracks are in place. The repairs are likely to be less costly than the changes that are proposed. Wikipedia has said that last year were 350,000 riders transported to and from the Rose Garden to the train or the zoo. If you're trying to make improvements to one of Portland's treasured historical landmarks, Washington Park, please do not remove the wonderful, relaxing, memory-making train ride. The main reason the tracks closed in 2014 were that there was a crib wall failure due to a rotted and rusted culvert pipe. Engineers usually fix and repair tracks during February and March, but were advised not to make these repairs as they wanted to evaluate, obtain proper permits, and so forth. There was last year, in 2017, a slide at Washington Park. However, this was not the reason the train run was closed. Zoo Railway and facilities maintenance employees are qualified to make these repairs. What is needed is an evaluation, permits, and inspections from the appropriate places, parks, city. The main attraction at the zoo, I believe, is the elephants and the train. The train is a money-making revenue attraction. The train tracks to the Rose Garden were completed in 1960. The park run was in service prior to the Zoo Loop in 1962. The Zoo Loop was removed to make room for the current elephant exhibit. It was needed. What's best for the zoo and Washington Park at this point is not to remove the historic run, but to work together for what is best for our City of Roses and its historical attributes. And I happened to make up a little sketch while I was here. The south entry to the Garden Plaza that's proposed, the roundhouse and train station are right here. You would only need an entrance of about the width of the room to enter, to get a train ride from the public parking area to the Rose Garden. You could take that separately from the zoo. You could take the 6-minute ride while you're within the zoo. Both of these train routes can be timed to work together.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Jan Zwartz here. I'm good to see all you again. I saw you about a month and a half ago with the Jansen Beach Mortgage. I too am a zoo operator. I'm a retired locomotive engineer. I'm representing myself and a few people from the Pacific Northwest chapter of the National Railway Historical Society. I'm also a superintendent of operations at the Willamette Shore Trolley, which is also another city operated place. Building a bike walk path next to the zoo tracks is not practical. Anybody who's ridden the zoo train to Washington Park would note the steep topography worthy of Colorado and the narrowness of the right-of-way. Typical train capacity out there is about 80 to 100 people per train every few minutes. The line to Washington Park is still intact, is needing some land slippage repairs. This type of repairs on the Class 1 railroads that I used to work on would be fixed in a day. The little bit of line left inside the zoo after the elephant project was done is not long enough ride for people to rest their weary feet. 15 minutes versus today's 6 to 7 minutes long. I have seen large groups, family groups, load all the kids on board with a couple of adults for minders, and the rest of them just stand around and wait about 5 or 6 minutes for the whole thing to come back. We lose a lot of revenue that way. It's frustrating. No repairs have been done. A consultant was set out to find big, scary numbers. That job done, it gave the bean counters ample excuse to do nothing. Numbers I've heard are 100,000 to fix immediate problems and $1.5 million over 10 years. Every group that has approached the right-of-way holders to help raise funds for repairs has been ignored so far. I've not heard anything of the meetings I go to about this, and whether we're going to help or not. We would love to help raise funds and make this go again. A regular railroad would have fixed the line pronto for maybe $20,000 and then figured out a way to do long-term fixes. I used to work for the Portland and Western Railroad and once helped chuck 92 cars of riprap down a mountainside near Nashville, Oregon to keep the line to Toledo, Oregon open. The polls and the surveys done by this project did not mention that a beloved icon of Washington Park, this train, would be lost forever if they put in their 12-foot bicycle path. The Washington Park Railway the Washington Park Zoo Railway can help pay towards the balance of fixing things and running things through paid ridership, because many of our riders are elderly, young mothers and children, handicapped, they all ride the train. Work trains currently go out to the end of the track. Only revenue service has not been going. Upkeep maintenance such as deadfall removal, track sweeps, and they have been done currently to keep it open. I like the idea of a tea snack shop in Washington Depot, and I hope we can keep this going in the future.
Thank you. Appreciate it very much. Thanks, all three of you. Next three, please.
The last two who signed up are Andy Jansky and Dean N. Alterman.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor and councilors, my name is Dean Alterman. I am a past president of the Japanese Garden, which is why I've moved from the Order of the Tin Cup to the Order of the Tin Button. But I'm speaking solely on my own behalf and with my past affiliations in mind. The plan that you have before you is a good first draft. It is not by any means finished. I have 3 points I'd like to make to you about it. Whether you are accepting it or adopting it, if the plan by your favorable vote would have some legal force tomorrow that it doesn't have today, then I believe you are making a land use decision and need to evaluate it against several of the goals in your comprehensive plan.
Thank you.
Page 13 of the current draft identifies among the goals of the plan to provide better accessibility and to solve parking challenges. Page 15 states as another goal to reduce the dominance of cars. Those are, I believe, directly tied into Goal 8H of your comprehensive plan, which provides that all Portlanders shall have safe, convenient, and equitable access to high-quality parks, natural areas, trails, etc. This plan clearly affects that goal, and I believe you're obligated, if this plan is to have any legal force of sorts, to evaluate it against that goal and possibly others in the comprehensive plan. Until that is done, I don't believe you're ready to adopt it. My second point is that the plan is not ready because it includes a number of contradictory points. It's generally bad form to adopt yes and no at the same time. I'll point out two of them. One, on page 13, the plan says that the park has few buildable areas, and then it names them. It states that only the soccer field will be built out for new tennis courts and to consolidate parking. However, point 4 on page 31 calls for building somewhere that is not on that list. Point 12 calls for doubling the building size of a maintenance area that is not in a location on that list. Those 2 points are simply contradictory to what is in the plan, and it seems premature to adopt it with a contradiction like that. There are others that I won't plague you with. That's not the only example. Third is that the parks plan states as one of its goals to limit traffic in the park, but it recommends a very significant action that does exactly the opposite. If you want to reduce the effect of cars in the park, the logical thing to do is to have them park as close as possible to whatever point at which they enter the park itself. Instead, as I understand the plan, it calls for cars to drive a great distance through the park to get to a parking lot, only to have their riders brought back by shuttle to where it is that they actually want to go. It seems to me that that provision by itself completely contradicts a stated goal of the plan. Until the plan is ready for adoption, or approval, whichever it is, again, I'm not quite sure, these contradictions need to be worked out. I'd ask that you not adopt it or approve it at this point, but ask the Parks Bureau to work with the organizations to improve it and put it into a shape where you can consider it. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mayor, Commissioners. I'm Andrew Jansky. I'm Northwest Trail Alliance Advocacy Chair. I spent my formative years at Washington Park, at OMSI, at the zoo. I'm a native Portlander. Then I spent significant time on the trails in Washington Park until bikes were excluded in the late 80s. Now I just ride my bike through regularly on my commute on the road you're talking about closing. I just wanted to say that staff had a hard job. I've been on that side of the table, and this looks like it was a really hard thing to get to where they got to. So I think that really needs to be appreciated. During the planning process, Northwest Trail Alliance was interviewed by Parks, and we appreciate their effort to engage with us. Significant public desire was expressed for mountain bikes in the park, and our Parks Director acknowledged that mountain biking is a service not provided in Southwest Portland. One of the key themes of the plan I saw was get out of your car and explore. My question is, why even get into your car? Did you ride here? Did you take a bus here, or did you drive here? Are you going to have a $60 parking ticket when you get out of this meeting that went past the 2 hours? Regarding implementation, the plan says community groups will be essential to the implementation and continued stewardship of Washington Park. It looks like the mountain bike community has been overlooked as a real partner again. The plan does include a mountain bike trail, and we thank you, Parks, but it's a low priority. It's forecasted for more than 15 years from now. An infant born today will likely be graduating from high school when the mountain bike trail opens, and I might be eligible for Social Security. Maybe both of them won't be there. Growing demand, acknowledged void of service, engaged community. It does seem like mountain biking should be reprioritized. We put in 12,000 hours of community service last year, and we have 1,000 members willing to help protect our natural areas. One final point, this is the only property in Southwest that maybe one neighbor has complained about mountain biking. This should be a reason alone to reprioritize mountain biking. Of course, cue the complaints. I'm sure you're going to get lots of emails now. You see the elephants and the penguins are with Metro, and they have already come to the conclusion that our outdoor advocates are all equally important. So also hearkening back to Emily's question of what I would do in a rainy day in Portland, I'd ride my bike to Washington Park from my home. I'd meet my friends there. I'd ride on a modern, sustainable trail that's winter-proof, and I would volunteer to build and help the trails there. Then I'd wash my bike off at the wash station that would get the weeds off of my bike so I didn't take your weeds into my home, and then I would ride home. That would be instead of driving for 2 hours to go for the same mountain bike ride that I could do in town. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, both of you. All right, that concludes public testimony. We'll bring staff back up.
So let me outline several issues, and then obviously council can add more. There's the issue of the train. There's the archery range and what's that? The Japanese garden and its accessible parking. The infamous Line 11 and the $10 million and the various options for Kingston Drive. There may have been others.
I've got a few. Want me to just jump in? Thank you, yes, Commissioner. Please. I want to introduce Victor Sanders, who manages on a day-to-day basis transportation issues up at Washington Park for Portland Parks and Recreation, and he has a wealth of information about traffic demand and all of those things. I might jump in on the train issue first, just because there was a lot of conversation about that. So Portland Parks owns the right-of-way, but we lease it to Metro for the train. The plan, the key component in the plan is linking the north and the south with a paved accessible trail. That could be done parallel to the train tracks within the right-of-way. It could be right on it if there was a rails to trails conversion, but Metro and Parks are still talking through that. So the main idea of the plan is connect north and south with that accessible path for bikes and pedestrians, and if Metro and others are interested in doing the train, do them both. So it's not a one or the other.
Yeah, the plan doesn't say that the train's going away.
No, it does not. No, it doesn't.
It's really
silent.
It's up to Metro because they are the ones who operate it. Is that correct?
Yes, but we have a role because it's our land, and so they have a leasehold on that track alignment. But you heard some testimony that there have been some slides in the area, so that's I think a concern for Metro.
So I guess on this point, we just heard testimony from an engineer, a train engineer, about, and I know this myself, how steep the slopes are adjacent to the rail track. So the idea of trails being built parallel to the existing rail just doesn't seem very cost effective, if even realistic.
Commissioner, it depends on where the location is, but you're right. If in some cases the grade of the road dropping down to where the railroad track is very steep, but it can also be very gentle when you go away from the road and further. So it would be laying out a trail and it has to be an accessible grade. So we have to find, those a flat alignment. We feel like we can do it somewhere. If it happens right on the railroad grade, that's the engineering, if you will, has already been solved, but it's really dependent on what they want to do with the train.
So I guess my interest, and maybe the plan doesn't even mention the train, I just heard that, but, I'm interested in the plan prioritizing keeping the train. I think the train is a fantastical element of the history of many of us who've grown up here. And a train is a very, it's a romantic thing. It's much better than a shuttle or a trail.
Right.
And so I'd like us to have some language in there saying that, and it sounds like given maybe the inertia or loggerheads that might ultimately develop down the road between Metro and the city over this, the train's going to lose out.
Well, I don't think that we and Metro are loggerheads. I think the key issue for Metro is, do they want to run the train, the cost of operating, and it also, I think it does provide a wonderful experience. A paved pathway is free, and so it could be available for everybody all the time. So this plan would not preclude both of those things happening simultaneously.
Well, I guess, and I won't belabor the point here, but I overall very supportive of the plan, but I do wonder if certain populations are not being thought of well enough, and those are families with young children and then very older adults, which are probably the two largest growing population segments in our city. I'll wager.
Well, we'll cover the adult bit.
So I'm just concerned that a trail sounds great to those of us that maybe are between 30 and 64. And hale and hearty. And I think a lot of this plan is kind of done with the hale and hearty Portlander in mind, and not the family raising 4 young kids in Hillsborough, or older adults who, I think this applies to my concerns about the garden parking too, just the accessibility for older adults.
Well, it relies heavily on the shuttle.
Yeah.
So that is definitely what we're crossing mind for that. Do you know offhand where the train is mentioned in the plan?
It is just mentioned in the section on the trail. There's a green box, probably around page 43 or so, page 46. In fact, there is a picture of the train on page 46.
So it says if the zoo train remains in operation, an arrow. So it's basically silent on whether the train does continue to exist.
We say, if the zoo train remains in operation, a narrower version of the regional trail should be explored.
There's Parks and Recreation is coordinating with Metro to determine how best to utilize the corridor and train station.
Correct.
So
That's in the green box on page 46?
Yeah, on the
That's
left-hand
in the
side.
green box on page 46.
The bottom of the second to last.
Currently,
paragraph.
Metro pays for the operation of the train, so that hasn't been Parks' responsibility to run the train. It's what we've done is made it possible by giving them an easement for the track.
So the plan doesn't say the train's going away. It doesn't say it's definitely staying.
No, we're trying to be neutral because we're dealing with a partner that also has to evaluate their realities of funding.
And we just certainly heard the new offer to fundraise, and one of the most surprising things I think from being Portland Parks and Recreation Commissioner is the enthusiasm of rail supporters and their real ability to raise boatloads of money. So I think we should not discount that. Is that something that could be discussed as part of the transportation management plan?
We originally were not going to put the regional trail in the transportation management plan, but the scope of work has not been determined, and so it could certainly be added into the transportation management plan.
Well, it's certainly, maybe it's an entertainment piece.
How about putting the train in the operation?
Yeah, that's
both
the
the regional
That's what
trail
I'm saying.
and the train.
Excuse
Right.
me, I meant both.
Because it's all part of getting people around and back and forth.
Correct.
So that's a potential solution.
I would
there.
say, I'd like to confer with Metro. The Explore Washington Park team is going to run the transportation management plan. Portland Parks is on the board, but so is Metro. So that'd be my, and we're discussing, like Emily said, what the scope of work is. So I think those are two things that we could put on the table, the regional connecting trail and the train. And
can I add one comment? Commissioner Fritz said that she's been impressed with the willingness of the train community to come forward and raise money. I mean, I think the best example of that is the Oregon Rail Heritage Foundation. And I think overall, a group raised somewhere like $4 or $5 million, built a home, and the various logistics of making that happen were daunting. But there is an extraordinary amount of enthusiasm around rail, people who like trains and like these kinds of things and family-friendly amenities. And I've actually never seen such indefatigable fundraising around a cause. So I would concur with Commissioner Fritz and Dan that we should put this in the transportation management plan and not leave it to the vagaries of a conversation with Metro, but we should scope it out as an option and then figure out what the cost is.
Well, certainly based on looking at the room, this seems to be a very unifying theme here, that people who disagreed on various other aspects of the plan are all enthusiastic about the train. So would that be a way forward, Commissioner?
Yeah, definitely, definitely. Could I ask a procedural question here? Sure. So, and I've read the resolution a couple of times, and I want to make sure I understand this. So what we are voting on today, assuming the amendments are also adopted, is a master plan which guides the process forward. So we are not saying this is exactly how it is going to be. I just want to be really clear. So, people testified, and they're like, well, my specific trail didn't get in, or I don't like where this particular parking lot is located. We're not cementing that today.
Right. That's correct.
We're accepting the report, and it will serve as a guideline.
And that is how, Mr. Mayor, all of Parks master plans have been accepted in the past. So they are, as you said, a framework for development. When other proposals come, we look at them and say, are they consistent with the master plan?
So
but we don't expect it to be the detail.
Future use and development. Yes. And in this particular case, with relationship to the train, it is silent on that subject.
Right.
It is neither guiding us to keep the train nor to not keep the train. But by adding it to the conversation about the transportation master plan, it just front loads it. As we are interested in this subject, and we want further details, discussions. What does it take to run it? What does it take to rehabilitate it? How much does it cost if we choose to do that? Is that a fair interpretation?
Absolutely, Mr.
Great.
And it is called out in the plan specifically, so it's not
so it highlights it a little more.
Yeah.
Shines
And
light.
also, that is true for everything in the master plan. As Director Abate said, this is not adopted as a land use document like the man from the Japanese garden mentioned. This is accepted under resolution as a guiding document for parks. And with all of our parks projects, when we go to the next step and have the money and go into design, we go back out to the public again. So we will have the discussion about food carts and food in the plaza area in the garden, and look at all those costs and expenses when we go through design.
Right. Well, and that's a very interesting question, but it's one that gets into a level of detail that this doesn't speak to at all.
No, nor is it intended to.
No. Yeah, it's meant to capture the big ideas. Okay. The big ideas: unite the north end and the south end, create a new entrance along Burnside, remove tennis courts and create a garden area. Those are the things that the master plan is making some very big moves about. But the specifics of, well, is that garden area a water garden or a winter garden, or what is it?
And I'm delighted to hear that description, Director Abate. Because I don't think we know sitting here today what the transportation situation is going to look like even 15 years from now. Those who follow transportation planning believe we are literally right on the edge of a transportation revolution, which could shift the demand for parking. It could shift the kind of infrastructure investments we need to make. It could shift the whole question of mobility for people who live with disabilities or older adults. And so I would be very reluctant to lock ourselves in today. It would sort of be like locking ourselves into an IBM Selectric right in 1984. So I'm glad to hear that this really is a guiding document that helps guide the bigger visionary points, but the details are left for when we actually have more information and more deeper conversations.
Right.
Good.
So, next question with, I think, a simple answer. The archery range, what's the plan for the archery range?
Well, the archery range, there was a lot of support for keeping it in the park. It's one of the only places within the city that you can actually take your bow and arrow and legally shoot in a public space. We did look at another location for the archery range down by where we were putting the tennis courts and the parking. It just turns out that's where the best place in the park was, and as I said, we went through 16 different traffic scenarios, and we decided that keeping Kingston open to connect the north and south ends of the park for shuttle and emergency and all sorts of different things, and to allow people with archery to drive to that location.
So there is an archery range in
Yes.
the park?
Yes, there is an archery
It's retained
range
in its current location,
Yeah.
slightly
I
renovated.
can ask you a dumb question since I don't own a crossbow. Are there any prohibitions on carrying a crossbow on public transit, or do you just have to have it?
I do not know the answer to that.
That's a good
I was
one.
just curious because
I don't think it's actually a
We've
crossbow.
definitely seen people do it within the park.
What's that?
Yeah, we've definitely seen people do it come out of the Max station. Yeah.
So anyway, the really, what we heard most of the testimony was accessibility to the Japanese garden. So could you lay out how many parking spaces are there now, how many are going? What is the plan for getting people with disabilities to the shuttle for the Japanese garden?
So let me give an attempt at this. So currently along Kingston, the spots that people are talking about in terms of the tennis courts, there are 85 parking spaces and the tennis courts. One of the things that you may have experienced when you're up there is those are head-in parking spaces perpendicular to Kingston Drive. You have 2 lanes of traffic and then about 18, 20 feet of parking spaces. The Bureau of Transportation would never, ever design a street with 90-degree parking adjacent to lanes of traffic. And the reason is very clear if you're there on a busy day, because cars pulling out or pulling in require all traffic on Kingston to come to a stop. That's particularly problematic when you're trying to run a shuttle bus. And so our shuttles get stuck behind cars pulling in and pulling out along the tennis courts. So, as I mentioned, 85 parking spaces are there. 30 will remain. 30 of those 85 will remain in that same general area, and most of those will be purposed as accessible parking spaces. Because what we're doing with the northern 2 tennis courts is you're coming right off of Kingston, you'll pull in, you could do a drop-off, or if you're a ride share, you could do a drop-off there. And if you need an accessible parking space, we will have that right for you there. So 30 of the 85 remain. They're just configured. They're no longer right adjacent to Kingston. They shift and get out of the traffic into a small lot. 50 additional spaces are the ones that move down the hill to the area that's currently the soccer field. So the tennis courts themselves and 50 of the 85 parking spaces move down to the new place where there will be a shuttle and a pickup. So am I clear there?
How would you respond to the questions that were raised specific to the Japanese garden about older adults? And that's something Dan had raised as well.
Just as Mike just said, on page 57 of the plan is where all of this is explained. So number 5 is a short-term accessible parking and drop-off in the garden to replace the existing tennis courts. So if you have, my parents are 88 and 90. I bring them to the Rose Garden all the time. They love it. And we park in accessible parking, and would still provide accessible parking for them and for me and for everybody else. As Mike just said, we have about, depends on how it's configured, but it could be up to 44, 45 spaces. It could be all accessible.
And this is where it's marked 5, number 5.
Yes, this is where the number 5 is. If we give Victor a little bit of time to talk, he is the guru of parking and how we do parking programming in the park. And so if the accessible spaces are available. They could be changed to other spaces, just depending on how the programming is working that day. And I also want to reassure everybody that number 6, the new surface parking lot, which has about 146 spaces, is a shuttle stop. And you can drive there, and all the shuttles in Washington Park are accessible.
What do you say to we had a person or two who testified about the virtue of placing the parking on the perimeter. So we're not requiring someone to enter the park. I mean, in a way, we're reverse engineering a problem here. We're saying drive through the park to get to parking, then get on a shuttle bus and go back to where you actually just came from. That does seem to work at cross purposes with some of the concerns we've heard. So how do you address that?
Well, you can still enter the park from Southwest Park Plaza. That park entrance is still available. You would drive into
after the reservoir project.
After the reservoir project, by the time you would come up Southwest Sherwood Boulevard, you would simply park right in the parking area, and then you would catch the shuttle or walk.
You'd bypass the whole area we're
You
talking
would
about.
bypass that whole area.
The other thing that's important.
Sherwood be two-way then or one-way?
Sherwood would only be two-way from Lewis and Clark Circle to the parking lot. It is one-way down the hill from right past the drop-off area, number 5, down to the parking lot, number 6, because we also want to allow parking on one side of Southwest Sherwood there. So there's parking, basically the only place we're eliminating parking is in front of 3 tennis courts. Otherwise, there will be parking still there and parking on Sherwood.
But that's very helpful. But to the question of, we're still encouraging people to enter the park, go into the park, and then take a shuttle back to where they want to go. Did you look at other locations for that parking?
We did. One of the things that was suggested was, well, why don't we just build a parking structure where the tennis courts are? And the challenge with that is a challenge that we find in lots of different sites around the park, including the Children's Museum site. It's a slide area. So it's not technically feasible to build a parking structure in that area. It's also the main reason why on the Children's Museum site we're thinking we shouldn't invest in that. But I would also say that another big advantage, and we heard a lot from the neighbors about the impacts of traffic off of Kingston, that Kingston will now be one way in. So we will reduce the congestion of cars coming in, maybe not being able to find a place to park, and then exiting back into the neighborhood and impacting neighborhood livability as well.
Our transportation expert wants to say anything.
Yeah, commissioners, I think a really important point here is the importance of the transportation management plan. And you'll see that we went back a couple months ago and we really added the importance to this plan. And that's going to address, I think, a lot of the questions that have been coming up. And the testimony that you heard today was there's these little things like, how are we going to get the accessible space from here to here? And that's what we're really going to open up and look at when we dive into the TMP. 4 years ago, we had no idea that Uber and Lyft were going to come on the scene. Now that's 10% of the people that are coming to our park are using rideshare. The next 5 years, we don't know, what that next thing is going to be. That's why the transportation management plan is going to be really important to kind of get into the nitty-gritty of these big ideas, as Director Abate had mentioned. So, I'm pretty confident that transportation management plan, you'll hear from the cultural partners, is really important to them, and we're committed to doing that.
What about, there was testimony about TriMet Line 63, TriMet,
we have a letter of
up until last week saying they were unwilling to service under the master plan?
No. We have a letter from TriMet last week. I think I've got it in that supports the master plan. Because we agree that the Line 63 should continue. Mm-hmm. Now, the route of it is something that we want the transportation management plan to look at, and TriMet is supportive of that. Okay, so.
Mike, I was sorry to hear about the Children's Museum being given, I guess they're getting adequate notice. Even 13 years is, I guess, fair notice, but it's, I have very fond memories of taking my kids there. And once upon a time, in fact, I had wondered whether we could locate the Jansen Beach Carousel adjacent to the Children's Museum and have the benefit of 2 great institutions. That's a long way around just asking you, is there a live conversation between parks and the folks that are trying to find a home for the carousel about considering a location within Washington Park? And is that worthy of a long-term conversation?
Commissioner, yeah, we were approached by the folks with the carousel. I introduced them to Ruth Shelley to have a conversation about, is there a way that the carousel and the Children's Museum could co-locate, because there's a sort of certainly a natural relationship there. I don't know where those discussions stand, but the master plan did not anticipate, a standalone, putting the carousel here without some kind of relationship with the Children's Museum.
Could I also just ask, since we did have a number of people who felt very strongly about food in the park, in the survey work that you did, was this issue one of those flashpoint issues, and do you have any data to share with us?
From the survey work we did, and from the focus groups that we did in East Portland, the majority of people wanted food in the park, just like what you said. They come to the park to enjoy it for the whole day. If they're taking public transportation or their family to pack a whole picnic lunch and bring everything in, it's very difficult. And sometimes it is a barrier for people for coming to the park. Just as we all know, if you look at the survey information, almost 50% of the people that are coming to the garden area are visitors from out of town. They're not thinking about where I can get a sandwich to bring into the park. So we've heard both when we did our tailgate party out in the park from the visitors and from people in East Portland and other family groups that having affordable food in Washington Park in the garden area was something that they valued.
And if also, Commissioner Fritz, during her tenure, has added tremendous capacity to our ball fields. I think of the turf that's been placed out in Delta Park and the lighting that makes those more accessible. I think about the new field that's in front of the headquarters of one of our new apparel headquarter businesses here and a number of other places. It grieves me a little bit to see a sports field taken out of a plan. Was this generally not a very well-used facility?
It has some extreme problems in just location. It's at the base of the hill. All the moisture from the forest around it settles down in that area, and so it was turning into a mud hole and has been that way. It's been very, very hard to maintain as a functioning field. So.
And was there any conversation between Parks and Lincoln about any needs that they have as a result of their expansion plans?
We did have a conversation with one of the coaches, assistant coaches at Lincoln along at the very beginning of the process. They, of course, wanted to keep the field if we could. They were really more concerned about having the tennis courts and having the tennis courts available to them.
Really?
Yeah.
Those are their.
That was their priority. They didn't say get rid of the field and we would be happy with that. I want to make that perfectly clear. But if we could not put the field in, their priority was to have some tennis courts for play for Lincoln students.
I could just pick up on the food issue again. I think the testimony was not so much the presence of food, but the type of food being prepared. And I think that totally resonates with me. I mean, if you're going to have deep-fried, fat-fried fumes in the air right near the Rose Garden, that just seems really inconsistent. So how about some restriction on the type of food, that it has to be sandwiches or something like that, but not,
absolutely, Commissioner,
not Thai food or whatever.
I'm not sure if it was under your watch at Parks that we adopted, or maybe it was Commissioner Fish, the healthy food policy that guides what kinds of menu options we offer at our community centers. I absolutely would guarantee. I'm sorry, it was Commissioner Fish, but I'll give you both credit.
I can hear Emily York, stirring. So I just.
I think we'd want to do something that reflects the values of the city and reflects the values of the park in an appropriate way. So I absolutely concur 100%.
So again, it's the odor issue.
Commissioner Daly.
I just want to go on record as saying I love the idea of food in the park, and I thank Commissioner Fritz for bringing one of the aspects of a lot of European and British parks, possibly, to Portland, where you can get delicious snacks. But I agree, there are there are nuisances or impacts that we need to think about mitigating. And so I've already come up with a new business, which may be my plan B. And that is a solar-powered, zero-waste picnic basket food cart.
Yeah.
So actually, anyone interested is free to grab that idea and run with it. And I'm being silly, but I'm serious. I don't like the idea of generators in the parks, certainly don't like the idea of waste, rats, but I do love the idea of refreshments being available. I think people would spend more time there, and it could bring more of a kind of festive communal
By the way,
feeling.
we already do it. I mean, one of
Yeah.
the great additions to Summer Free-for-All was the bringing healthy food trucks. And it turns out that just as in our rec centers, when you have a captive audience and you offer them a healthy choice, they're gonna gravitate to the healthy choice if they're hungry. And so it's a double win.
Right. I'd also mention, too, that in the plan is looking at the South Zoo train station, and could that be converted to more of a sit-down kind of place? It's really, it's perched up above. It has a wonderful view of the Rose Garden and the city, so that's another thing that's in the plan as well.
I see a couple of thumbs ups back there. Looks like
Yeah,
people
good.
like that.
We noticed on trains and
You
food.
can't tell.
This is great.
You and Commissioner Daly are
Not
going to go
entirely,
into business at the train depot.
Okay, all right.
Mike, we have a letter from Dean Alterman. Dean is she's a terrific lawyer and a terrific human being, but he in his letter, he raises the question about at what point does this become potentially a land use proceeding versus a master plan? I mean, I know this is a heavily regulated area. The way we would normally address any inconsistencies in a plan or a report or potential inconsistencies, we would clean them up as we go along. He's raising a more fundamental question about whether this is a land use proceeding and therefore must somehow be guided by the 2035 comprehensive plan or whatever. Have you had a chance to, would you offer an opinion on that?
Well, could we just ask the city attorney on that? Because
So I would be happy to have conversations, with you about that. What I would say is, as it is currently framed as a guidance document, no, it would not be a land use decision as it is framed right now.
And I would further add, we would be in a boatload of trouble if we were coming here with a land use proceeding and had not gone through all of the required notifications, Planning and Sustainability Commission unit. And I would expect that the City Attorney's Office would have brought this to our attention prior to this. So this is a guidance document.
I'm not an attorney, so I'm just going to tell you exactly how it is in legal land. This is not a regulatory overlay. It says in the very first sentence that it is a guide for future use and development.
Right.
Correct.
Right.
There's nothing binding in this.
Right. We do try to live up to the spirit of master plans, knowing that, a council that accepted one has given us the guidance to move forward consistent with that master plan. But
Yeah, I was just trying to make our legal counsel twitch. I actually have no idea from a legal perspective, but it sounded good to me. Anything else,
Mike, how do we pay for this? And this is a long-term vision. I mean, this is.
Absolutely.
So this sounds like my 14-year-old is going to be close to 40 when this is actually.
It's going to be his job to pay for it.
He'll pay for it. So there's nothing in here about how we pay for it. There was one comment that I noted that I just want to offer a brief rebuttal on, which is, yes, we have to choose among competing priorities. Yes, this is a big ticket item and we don't have any money for it. I hope in this that we don't lose track of the fact that in the last 4 years, Parks has invested over $50 million in building out parks in East Portland. And I think we should all take great pride in the fact that you've taken the bulk of the SDC revenue and whatever other money wasn't nailed down, and you've invested it in East Portland. And in fact, within about a 10-year period, there will be a revolution in terms of new spaces for play and green spaces in East Portland. So I actually believe that will be one of Amanda's most significant legacies at the helm of Parks. But we have to make choices, and on this one, clearly, we don't know how to pay for it now, right?
Well, yes, and Commissioner, I'd say that we knew when we began the master plan that whatever the number came up to be, we wouldn't have a strategy yet. That's one of the reasons we took a little bit different approach. You saw the list of people on the Champions Committee. These are citizens who have given their time and signed on, knowing that they would be partners in trying to help us find different funding mechanisms for different components of the park. Of the plan. So whether it's public-private partnerships in some things, revenue generators like a restaurant or food, there's a myriad of things. And you're right. The plan, once adopted, if it has your support or accepted, excuse me, we will then go to work on how do we fund it and what are the most urgent areas. I think John Russell brought up an interesting idea. You know, I haven't consulted with anyone on that, but bonding against future parking revenues. That sounds like an interesting idea. So
it's a good one.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Commissioner.
So I guess my final question, well, two final questions. I guess one's not a question. One is, I'm looking for an absolute commitment that a transportation management plan will be adopted prior to implementation of any aspect of this plan.
Yes, we'll bring that back. We will bring that back to council.
Okay.
Yes.
And then secondly, I was sympathetic to Andrew Jansky's point about the all-purpose bike trail being 15 years off. Any chance we could move that into 1 to 5 years?
Yes. And I'd say that some of those, there are a few things that make sense to be into later phases because there's a prerequisite ahead of time. Like, for example, we don't want to build a parking lot until the Children's Museum moves, right? But there's other things that, like the canopy walk for the Hoyt Arboretum or a mountain biking trail, that if the resources were available, we might be able to move those up sooner. So, and we mentioned that to Andy in previous conversations. So, yes, we could move that up.
Well, we don't have any money for any of it, so
right.
There's that. Yeah. And I do just want to mention with the canopy walk that we in no way want to take away from the experience at Leach Botanical Gardens, and so it actually specifies in the plan that Leach goes first, and if it's successful, then we'll consider having one at Washington Park. But, you know, there's various different entities who are willing to go fundraise for this park, being the jewel of the crown. I do, and I think the Bureau does want to make sure that we continue our work providing wonderful experiences for people who don't have any, knowing that this vision will guide any actions in the plan over the next many years.
If I could just have one final word, I just want to personally thank Emily for her tireless efforts. It's been 2 years. Emily Roth has been involved in many of the most important planning efforts in this city, and the Washington Park Master Plan has been a tremendous effort with positive impact. So regardless of your decision, Council, I just want to commend and thank Emily for her great work.
Great. Any other questions before I call the question?
Are we going to vote on the amendment?
To the amendment. Commissioner Fritz has given us an amendment written out nicely on Portland Parks and Recreation stationery. Any further discussion on the amendment? Please call the roll.
Fritz.
Aye.
Fish.
Aye.
Saltzman.
Aye.
Udaley.
Aye.
Wheeler.
Aye. The amendment's adopted. To the main motion, please call the roll.
Fritz.
I am tremendously proud of the work that you have done, and I'm proud to be associated with it. I want to emphasize you have done the bulk of the work, and as with the community. And thank you to every community member who came in. A wide variety of different opinions, and I think everybody got some things they liked. Probably most people got things that didn't get exactly what they wanted. And so this is a guidance plan, and the funding of it is obviously going to be huge. I also thank Emily Roth. You've done an amazing job on this project, as you did with the Forest Park Natural Resources Management Plan and all the other associated things. I'm very pleased with the community engagement on this. There's always ways we can improve. I am very grateful to the Arlington Heights Neighborhood Association, the Sylvan Highlands Neighborhood Association, and everybody who's been involved. Thank you to the Champions Committee. You really have been champions on this, and will be needed moving forward. I was a bit skeptical when Mike, and thank you, Mike, for your leadership on this. Mike mentioned about the Champions Committee. I was like, well, that seems like a pretty tall order. Do you think people are going to want to do that. And not only have you wanted to do that, but you have done it in a really amazing fashion. And so this is a phenomenal plan that if we do only part of it, it will still be a great step forward for this, for Washington Park. Thank you to Pooja Bhatt and Christina Nieves on my staff who've really been engaged, and also Michelle Hansman, who's answered multiple different emails from folks wanting to just get the information. We're probably I am at least 50 emails behind, so I'll try and work on that in the near future. But it's a plan that people all over Portland, in fact, probably people all over the state of Oregon, are invested in and care about this wonderful place within our community. And since we can't build our way out of our parking problems, we have to figure out some other solutions. And I'm really hopeful that this plan will do that. Thank you to my colleagues also for your active engagement. Aye.
Fish.
Well, Commissioner Fritz, thank you very much for bringing this forward and for guiding this council discussion. I will enthusiastically vote to accept this plan. You know, I was chuckling when people kept saying Emily's been handling all the hard work. There ought to be there must be something in your contract, some kind of hardship pay for some of the things that you've worked on. But you've had some very tough assignments, and you do a superb job, so thank you. Mike, thank you for guiding the Bureau through this process and reconciling all the different voices. With Commissioner Fritz at the helm of Portland Parks and Rec, I have no doubt there was a robust public process, engaging lots of voices. And frankly, I thought the icing on the cake was the comment that you made that East Portland was surveyed on questions including whether they wanted food. And that is terrific. And that probably was not the case 10 years ago. So thank you for that work. And I'll just say on a personal note, without going into too many details, I've been taking some personal days recently. And on my personal days when I need to find a place that's quiet and nourishing and allows for recovery time, I've been spending a lot of time walking around Washington Park discovering things that I didn't really know about it. And it is a crown jewel. Our city is blessed with so many wonderful things, but this is a crown jewel. And what I love about this is that you're giving us a blueprint for how we can continue to have a world-class Washington Park for the next generations to come. And we should be doing more of this in planning for the future. So thank you for your good work. I'm very proud to accept the report. Aye.
Saltzman?
Well, I want to thank Commissioner Fritz for her leadership and Portland Parks and Recreation, and in particular Emily Roth for this plan. As you probably saw from my motion about the train, Washington Park holds a special place in my heart. I grew up near there, and as a teenager, engaged in probably a lot of activities that were at the time illegal.
Were you a zoo bomber?
Yeah, not a zoo bomber, no. But I frequented.
Carla, strike that from the record.
A little earlier than that.
I frequented the trail quite a bit. I'm sorry, the park.
Stop while you're ahead.
Frequented the park, but I also love the trails in Hoyt Arboretum and walk those to this day when I get a chance. And I just really think that this is a jewel, and I think we have now a master plan in front of us that reflects, has that jewel in its reflection, and will serve us well into the future. And I appreciate your willingness to, accommodate our concerns about the train, about the transportation master plan, food, things like that. Thank you. Aye.
You, Daly.
Well, how do I follow that?
How do you top that?
I could
confess.
give a similar confession, but I'm not going to.
Yeah.
I will say thank you to Commissioner, well, and I'm pretty sure that the mayor could as well, but we did all grow up here. Thank you to Commissioner Fritz and to Portland Parks and Rec. I also grew up going to the park, and my earliest memory is being taken up there by my 85-year-old kind of fairy godmother, Esther Strong, who was an early supporter of the Japanese garden. And it's just, and thank you to the community, because it's just an incredible opportunity to kind of revive and expand and re-envision a beautiful place. Aye.
Wheeler.
There's so much I could say, but that I will not, Commissioner Saltzman. Thank you, everybody who testified today. I am extremely pleased with this work. I think this is fantastic. And as somebody who's had an arm's length distance to the work that Commissioner Fritz has been doing and the Parks Bureau has been doing, and Emily, that you have been doing, it has been fun to watch this come to fruition. And I think it paints a really brilliant vision for the future of this park. And I want to go back to something that you had said, Mike, a number of months ago on a different topic, which was this is a regional draw. This is a important asset for the entirety of the city of Portland because the breadth of the park and the services and the experiences that one can have here. And I feel like you've been respectful of that reality, that this is really a regional asset. So thank you for that. I appreciate Commissioner Fritz's amendments. And I am very, very happy to support this. And I really look forward to the work that's going to be done based on some of the testimony today around the trains, the transportation plan, figuring out the parking situation, you know, and making sure that it fits with our vision as an age-friendly city. This is all great work, and I think great work begets great work. So I vote aye. The resolution is adopted as amended. Colleagues, I need a quorum to stick around for just a moment. Thank you for everybody who is here. Carla, could you read items 259 to 262, please?
259, adopt the Central City 2035 Plan, Volume 2A, Part 3, Environmental and Scenic, amend the Portland zoning map and Portland zoning codes for environmental overlay zones and scenic resource zones. 260, adopt the Central City Plan 2035 Plan, amend the comprehensive plan.
Excuse me. Folks, I'm sorry. This is a really important, it's procedural, but it's important. So if I could ask you to keep your voices down while we're going through this. Thank you.
The comprehensive plan, map, transportation system plan, Willamette Greenway plan, Willamette River Greenway inventory, scenic resources protection plan, zoning map and Title 33, repeal and replace prior Central City plans and documents. 261, adopt the Central City 2035 plan, action charts, performance targets, and urban design diagrams. 262, adopt the Central City 2035 plan, Green Loop concept report.
Colleagues, these items 259 to 262, related to the Central City 2035 plan, originally scheduled for March 15th, are continued to March 22nd at 2 p.m., and therefore they will not be discussed today, March 15th. Does that pass muster with legal counsel?
I believe there are some additional announcements.
I do not have them. Can you provide them to me, please? Thank you. We were scheduled to take up the Central City 2035 plan at this time. However, on March 8th, the City Council decided that they needed more time to analyze several of the amendment items on the table and asked to postpone the discussion. So we're continuing this item to March 22nd, 2018 at 2 p.m. time certain. That's March 22nd, 2018 at 2 p.m. time certain. On March 22nd, we'll discuss the following items. 1, the new amendments that were moved, seconded, and the subject of a public hearing on March 7th. That includes the view from the I-84 overpass, the view of Mount Adams from Upper Hall, and how to measure top of bank under structures, amongst other things. Number 2, Commissioner Udaley has indicated that she intends to propose a motion for reconsideration of the River Place height and tower orientation amendments that were voted down on March 7th. Since there was public testimony on the River Place amendments on January 18th, there will not be any additional public testimony on that item on March 22nd. 3, on March 22nd, I will introduce amendments related to access and parking on public school sites in the Central City. This has come to my attention because Lincoln High School is in the midst of the redevelopment process. If there is a second to my amendment, Council will take public testimony on the amendments that day. Any written testimony on those amendments must be submitted before the close of the public hearing, because I intend to ask the council to vote on that item once testimony closes. Materials for the March 22nd session, including the proposed amendments for public school sites in the Central City, will be posted on the BPS website by close of business on Friday, March 16th, 2018. And I should note that BPS stands for the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability. So that will be on their website by close of business on Friday, March 16th, 2018. Question from Commissioner
How
Fritz.
will community members who don't happen to be watching at 5:10 at the end of a Parks hearing know about the Lincoln High School amendments in order to be able to send them in if they don't happen to be checking the Bureau's website on a daily basis?
So two things. One, as part of land use hearings, there is an anticipation that people who are following the process would follow each of these hearings, and so the reason we are holding you here after 5 o'clock is to make sure we're continuing it appropriately. It is also my understanding that Bureau of Planning and Sustainability sends out email blasts to their list of people who are interested in the process, and it will be included in, either has been or will be, and I apologize, I don't know if it has been yet, but it will be included in their email that goes out to folks.
So, Mayor, as the commissioner in charge of the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability, I would appreciate it if you would have the Bureau send out an email highlighting the amendment that you're going to be bringing, because otherwise we've been through this whole process. People might feel that there was nothing on the table. They don't need to come to that last discussion. And can you do that, please?
I can do that. And could I please work with legal counsel to make sure that that happens appropriately?
Yes, and I had received a text while you were reading the script from BPS from Sally Edmonds saying, we are also sending out the amendment in an e-news tomorrow. So I'm receiving same time text that they are in fact sending that information.
Okay, I just want to make sure that it's a single issue email rather than here's the gamut of things and this might be buried on paragraph 6.
Okay, I suspect Sally is listening right now, and I suspect
Sally, I trust Sally to do the right thing.
We will highlight that, yes.
Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. We appreciate it. Colleagues, there being no further business, we are adjourned.
Thanks, everybody, for staying.